March 1660, 1669. March 1st. Up and to Whitehall to the Committee of Tangier, but it did not meet. But here I do hear first that my Lady Paulina Montagu did die yesterday, at which I went to my lord's lodgings, but he is shut up with sorrow, and so not to be spoken with, and therefore I returned, and to Westminster Hall, where I have not been, I think, in some months. And here the hall was very full, the king having, by commission to some lords this day, prorogued the Parliament till the 19th of October next, at which I am glad, hoping to have time to go over to France this year. But I was most of all surprised this morning by my Lord Bellasis, who, by appointment, met me at Auditor Wood, S. at the Temple, and tells me of a duel designed between the Duke of Buckingham and my Lord Halifax, or Sir W. Coventry, the challenge being carried by Harry Savile, but prevented by my Lord Arlington, and the king told of it. And this was all the discourse at court this day. But I, meeting Sir W. Coventry in the Duke of York's chamber, he would not own it to me, but told me that he was a man of too much peace to meddle with fighting, and so it rested. But the talk is full in the town of the business. Thence, having walked some turns with my cousin Pepys, and most people, by their discourse, believing that this Parliament will never sit more, I away to several places to look after things against tomorrow's feast, and so home to dinner. And thence, afternoon, my wife and I out by hackney coach, and spent the afternoon in several places, doing several things at the Change and elsewhere against tomorrow. And among others, I did also bring home a piece of my face cast in plaister, for to make a wizard upon for my eyes. And so home, where W. Baitlier come and sat with us, and there, after many doubts, did resolve to go on with our feast and dancing tomorrow. And so, after supper, left the maids to make clean the house, and to lay the cloth and other things against tomorrow, and we to bed. Second, up and at the office till noon, when home, and there I find my company come, namely, Madam Turner, Dyke the and Betty Turner, and Mr. Bellwood, formerly their father's clerk, but now set up for himself a conceited, silly fellow, but one they make mightily of my cousin Roger Pepys, and his wife and 2 daughters. I had a noble dinner for them, as I almost ever had, and mighty merry, and particularly myself pleased with looking on Betty Turner, who is mighty pretty. After dinner, we fell one to one talk, and another to another, and looking over my house and closet and things, and the Turner to write a letter to a lady in the country, in which I did, now and then, put in 6 words, and sometimes 5 or 6 lines, and then she as much, and made up a long and good letter, she being mighty witty really, though troublesome humored with it. And thus till night that our music come, and the office ready and candles, and also W. Baitlier and his sister Susan come, and also Will Howe and 2 gentlemen more strangers which, at my request yesterday, he did bring to dance, called Mr. Ireton and Mr. Starkey. We fell to dancing, and continued only with intermission for a good supper, till 2 in the morning, the music being greeting, and another most excellent violin, and Theorbo, the best in town. And so with mighty mirth, and pleased with their dancing of jigs afterwards several of them, and among others Betty Turner, who did it mighty prettily. And lastly, W. Baitlier's Blackmore and Blackmore mad. And then to a country dance again, and so broke up with extraordinary pleasure, as being one of the days and nights of my life spent with the greatest content, and that which I can but hope to repeat again a few times in my whole life. This done, we parted, the strangers home, and I did lodge my cousin Pepys and his wife in our blue chamber, my cousin Turner, her sister, and they in our best chamber, Bab, Betty, and Betty Turner in our own chamber, and myself and my wife in the maid's bed, which is very good. Our maids in the coachman's bed, the coachman with the boy in his settled, and Tom where he uses to lie. And so I did, to my great content, lodge at once in my house, with the greatest ease, 15, and 8 of them strangers of quality. My wife this day put on first her French gown, called a sack, which becomes her very well, brought her over by W. Baitlier. Third, up after a very good night's rest, and was called upon by Sir H. Comely, who was with me an hour, and though acquainted did not stay to talk with my company I had in the house, but away, and then I to my guests, and got them to breakfast, and then parted by coaches. And I did in mine carry my she-cousin Pepys and her daughters home, and there left them, and so to Whitehall, where W. Hewer met me. And he and I took a turn in St. James's Park, and in the mall did meet Sir W. Coventry and Sir J. Duncombe, and did speak with them about some business before the Lords of the Treasury. But I did find them more than usually busy, though I knew not then the reason of it, though I guess it by what followed tomorrow. Thence to Dankers, the painter, and there saw my picture of Greenwich, finished to my very good content, though this manner of distemper do make the figures not so pleasing as in oil. So to unthank and there took up my wife and carried her to the Duke of York's playhouse, and there saw an old play, the first time acted these 40 years, called The Ladies' Trial, acted only by the young people of the house, but the house very full. But it is but a sorry play, and the worse by how much my head is out of humor by being a little sleepy, and my legs weary since last night. So after the play we to the New Exchange, and so called at my cousin Turner and there, meeting Mr. Bellwood, did hear how my Lord Mayor, being invited this day to dinner at the Readers at the Temple, and endeavoring to carry his sword up, the students did pull it down, and forced him to go and stay all the day in a private councillor's chamber, until the Reader himself could get the young gentleman to dinner. And then my Lord Mayor did retreat out of the temple by stealth, with his sword up. This do make great heat among the students, and my Lord Mayor did send to the king, and also I hear that Sir Richard Browne did cause the drums to beat for the train bands, but all is over. Only I hear that the students do resolve to try the charter of the city. So we home, and betimes to bed, and slept well all night. 4th. Up and a while at the office, but thinking to have Mr. Povy's business today at the Committee for Tenure, I left the board and away to Whitehall, where in the first court I did meet Sir Jeremy Smith, who did tell me that Sir W. Coventry was just now sent to the Tower, about the business of his challenging the Duke of Buckingham, and so was also Harry Savile to the gatehouse. Which, as a gentleman, and of the Duke of York's bedchamber, I heard afterwards that the Duke of York is mightily incensed at, and do appear very high to the king that he might not be sent thither, but to the Tower, this being done only in contempt to him. This news of Sir W. Coventry did strike me to the heart, and with reason, for by this and my Lord of Ormond's business, I do doubt that the Duke of Buckingham will be so flushed that he will not stop at anything, but be forced to do anything now, as thinking it not safe to end here. And Sir W. Coventry being gone, the king will have never a good counsellor, nor the Duke of York any sure friend to stick to him, nor any good man will be left to advise what is good. This therefore do heartily trouble me as anything that ever I heard, so up into the house, and met with several people. But the committee did not meet, and the whole house I find full of this business of Sir W. Coventry, and most men very sensible of the cause and effects of it. So, meeting with my Lord Bellasis, he told me the particulars of this matter, that it arises about a quarrel which Sir W. Coventry had with the Duke of Buckingham about a design between the Duke and Sir Robert Howard, to bring him into a play at the King's house, which W. Coventry not enduring, did by H. Savile send a letter to the Duke of Buckingham, that he had a desire to speak with him. Upon which, the Duke of Buckingham did bid Holmes, his champion ever since my Lord Shrewsbury's business. Charles Roman II wrote to his sister, Henrietta, Duchess of Orleans, on March 7, 1669, I am not sorry that Sir Will. Coventry has given me this good occasion by sending my Lord of Buckingham a challenge to turn him out of the council. I do intend to turn him also out of the treasury. The truth of it is, he has been a troublesome man in both places, and I am well rid of him. Julia Cartwright's, Madame, 1894, p. 283. Go to him to know the business. But H. Savile would not tell it to any but himself, and therefore did go presently to the Duke of Buckingham, and told him that his uncle Coventry was a person of honour, and was sensible of his Grace's liberty taken of abusing him, and that he had a desire of satisfaction, and would fight with him. But that here they were interrupted by my Lord Chamberlain's coming in, who was commanded to go to bid the Duke of Buckingham to come to the king, Holmes having discovered it. He told me that the king did last night, at the council, ask the Duke of Buckingham, upon his honour, whether he had received any challenge from W. Coventry, which he confessed that he had. And then the king asking W. Coventry, he told him that he did not own what the Duke of Buckingham had said, though it was not fit for him to give him a direct contradiction. But being by the king put upon declaring, upon his honour, the matter, he answered that he had understood that many hard questions had upon this business been moved to some lawyers, and that therefore he was unwilling to declare anything that might, from his own mouth, render him obnoxious to his Majesty's displeasure, and therefore prayed to be excused. which the king did think fit to interpret to be a confession, and so gave warrant that night for his commitment to the Tower. Being very much troubled at this, I away by coach homewards and directly to the Tower, where I find him in one Mr. Bennet's house, son to Major Bailey, one of the officers of the ordnance in the Brick Tower. The Brick Tower stands on the northern wall, a little to the west of Martin Tower, with which it communicates by a secret passage. It was the residence of the master of the ordnance, and Raleigh was lodged here for a time, where I find him busy with my Lord Halifax and his brother. So I would not stay to interrupt them, but only to give him comfort and offer my service to him, which he kindly and cheerfully received, only owning his being troubled for the king his master's displeasure, which, I suppose, is the ordinary form and will of persons in this condition. And so I parted with great content that I had so earlily seen him there, and so going out did meet Sir Jer. Smith going to meet me, who had newly been with Sir W. Coventry. And so he and I by water to Redriff, and so walked to Diptford, where I have not been, I think, these 12 months, and there to the treasurer's house, where the Duke of York is, and his Duchess. And there we find them at dinner in the great room, unhung, and there was with them my Lady Duchess of Monmouth, the Countess of Falmouth, Castlemaine, Henrietta Hyde, my Lady Hinchingbroke's sister, and my Lady Peterborough. And after dinner Sir Jer. Smith and I were invited down to dinner with some of the maids of honor, namely, Mrs. Ogle, Blake, and Howard, which did me good to have the honor to dine with and look on, and the mother of the maids, and Mrs. Howard, the mother of the maid of honor of that name, and the Duke's housekeeper here. Here was also Monsieur Blankfort, Sir Richard Powell, Colonel Villars, Sir Jonathan Trelawney, and others. And here drank most excellent and great variety, and plenty of wines, more than I have drank at once these 7 years, but yet did me no great hurt. Having dined and very merry, and understanding by Blankfort how angry the Duke of York was, about their offering to send Savile to the gatehouse, among the rogues. And then, observing how this company, both the ladies and all, are of a gang, and did drink a health to the union of the two brothers, and talking of others as their enemies, they parted, and so we up. And there I did find the Duke of York and Duchess, with all the great ladies, sitting upon a carpet on the ground, there being no chairs, playing at I love my love with an A, because he is so and so, and I hate him with an A because of this and that. And some of them, but particularly the Duchess herself and my Lady Castlemaine, were very witty. This done, they took barge, and I with Sir J. Smith to Captain Cox S., and there to talk, and left them and other company to drink, while I slunk out to Bagwell S., and there saw her and her mother and our late maid Nell, who cried for joy to see me. But I had no time for pleasure then nor could stay, but after drinking I back to the yard, having a month's mind para have had a bout with Nell, which I believe I could have had, and may another time. So to Cox S., and thence walked with Sir J. Smith back to Redriff. And so, by water home, and there my wife mighty angry for my absence, and fell mightily out, but not being certain of anything, but thinks only that Pierce or Knepp was there, and did ask me, and I perceive, the boy, many questions. But I did answer her, and so, after much ado, did go to bed and lie quiet all night, but had another bout with me in the morning, but I did make shift to quiet her, but yet she was not fully satisfied, poor wretch, in her mind, and thinks much of my taking so much pleasure from her, which indeed is a fault, though I did not design or foresee it when I went. 5th. Up and by water to Whitehall, where did a little business with the Duke of York at our usual attending him, and thence to my wife, who was with my coach at Unthank S., though not very well of those upon her, and so home to dinner, and after dinner I to the Tower, where I find Sir W. Coventry with abundance of company with him. And after sitting a while, and hearing some merry discourse, and among others of Mr. Brounker's being this day summoned to Sir William Morton, one of the judges, to give in security for his good behaviour, upon his words the other day to Sir John Morton, a Parliament man at Whitehall, who had heretofore spoke very highly against Brounker in the House, I away, and to Aldgate, and walked forward towards Whitechapel, till my wife overtook me with the coach, it being a mighty fine afternoon. And there we went the first time out of town with our coach and horses, and went as far as Bow, the spring beginning a little now to appear, though the way be dirty. And so, with great pleasure, with the forepart of our coach up, we spent the afternoon. And so in the evening home, and there busy at the office a while, and so to bed, mightily pleased with being at peace with my poor wife, and with the pleasure we may hope to have with our coach this summer, when the weather comes to be good. Sixth, up and to the office, where all the morning, only before the office I stepped to Sir W. Coventry at the Tower, and there had a great deal of discourse with him. Among others, of the king's putting him out of the council yesterday, with which he is well contented, as with what else they can strip him of, he telling me, and so hath long done, that he is weary and surfeited of business. But he joins with me in his fears that all will go to naught, as matters are now managed. He told me the matter of the play that was intended for his abuse, wherein they foolishly and sillily bring in 2 tables like that which he hath made, with a round hole in the middle, in his closet, to turn himself in. And he is to be in one of them as master, and Sir J. Duncombe in the other as his man or imitator. And their discourse in those tables, about the disposing of their books and papers, very foolish. But that he is offended with, is his being made so contemptible, as that any should dare to make a gentleman a subject for the mirth of the world. And that therefore he had told Tom Killigrew that he should tell his actors, whoever they were, that did offer at anything like representing him, that he would not complain to my Lord Chamberlain, which was too weak, nor get him beaten, as Sir Charles Sidley is said to do, but that he would cause his nose to be cut. He told me the passage at the council much like what my Lord Bellasis told me. He told me how that the Duke of Buckingham did himself, some time since, desire to join with him, of all men in England, and did bid him propound to himself to be chief minister of state, saying that he would bring it about, but that he refused to have anything to do with any faction. And that the Duke of Buckingham did, within these few days, say that, of all men in England, he would have chosen W. Coventry to have joined entire with. He tells me that he fears their prevailing against the Duke of York, and that their violence will force them to it, as being already beyond his pardon. He repeated to me many examples of challenging of privy councillors and others, but never any proceeded against with that severity which he is, it never amounting to others to more than a little confinement. He tells me of his being weary of the treasury, and of the folly, ambition, and desire of popularity of Sir Thomas Clifford, and yet the rudeness of his tongue and passions when angry. This and much more discourse being over, I with great pleasure come home and to the office, where all the morning, and at noon home to dinner, and thence to the office again, where very hard at work all the afternoon till night, and then home to my wife to read to me, and to bed, my cold having been now almost for 3 days quite gone from me. This day my wife made it appear to me that my late entertainment this week cost me above L12, an expense which I am almost ashamed of, though it is but once in a great while, and is the end for which, in the most part, we live, to have such a merry day once or twice in a man's life. 7th Lord's Day. Up and to the office, busy till church time, and then to church, where a dull sermon, and so home to dinner, all alone with my wife, and then to even my journal to this day, and then to the Tower to see Sir W. Coventry, who had H. German and a great many more with him, and more, while I was there, come in. So that I do hear that there was not less than 60 coaches there yesterday, and the other day. Which I hear also that there is a great exception taken at, by the King and the Duke of Buckingham, but it cannot be helped. Thence home, and with our coach out to Suffolk Street, to see my cousin Pepys, but neither the old nor young at home. So to my cousin Turner S., and there stayed talking a little, and then back to Suffolk Street, where they not being yet come home I to Whitehall, and there hear that there are letters come from Sir Thomas Allen, that he hath made some kind of peace with Algiers. Upon which the King and Duke of York, being to go out of town tomorrow, are met at my Lord Arlington's. So I there, and by Mr. Wren was desired to stay to see if there were occasion for their speaking with me, which I did, walking without with Charles Porter. In Norwich, an prentice boy in the city in the rebellious times. When the committee house was blown up, he was very active in that rising, and after the soldiers came and dispersed the rout, he, as a rat among joint stools, shifted to and fro among the shambles, and had 40 pistols shot at him by the troopers that rode after him to kill him. In that distress he had the presence of mind to catch up a little child that during the rout was frighted and stood crying in the streets, and unobserved by the troopers ran away with it. The people opened a way for him, saying, "Make room for the poor child." Thus he got off, and while search was made for him in the marketplace, got into the Yarmouth ferry, and at Yarmouth took ship and went to Holland. In Holland he trailed a pike, and was in several actions as a common soldier. At length he kept a Cavalier eating house, but his customers being needy, he soon broke, and came for England, and being a genteel youth was taken in among the chancery clerks, and got to be under a master. His industry was great, and he had an acquired dexterity and skill in the forms of the court, and although he was a bond companion and followed much the bottle, yet he made such dispatches as satisfied his clients, especially the clerks, who knew where to find him. His person was florid, and speech prompt and articulate, but his vices, in the way of women and the bottle, were so ungoverned as brought him to a morsel. When the Lord Keeper North had the seal, who from an early acquaintance had a kindness for him which was well known, and also that he was well heard, as they call it, business flowed in to him very fast, and yet he could scarce keep himself at liberty to follow his business. At the Revolution, when his interest fell from, and his debts began to fall upon him, he was at his wits' end. His character for fidelity, loyalty, and facetious conversation was without exception Roger North's Lives of the Norths, Lord Keeper Guilford, ed. Jessop, Volume IPP. 381-2. He was originally made Lord Chancellor of Ireland in the reign of James Roman II, during the viceroyalty of Lord Clarendon, 1686, when he was knighted. He was, says Burnet, a man of ready wit, and being poor was thought a person fit to be made a tool of. When Clarendon was recalled, Porter was also displaced, and Fitton was made Chancellor, a man who knew no other law than the king's pleasure. Own time. Sir Charles Porter was again made Lord Chancellor of Ireland in 1690, and in this same year he acted as one of the Lords Justices. This note of Lord Braybrooke, S. is retained and added to, but the reference may after all be to another Charles Porter. See Volume Roman 3, p. 122, and Volume Roman 6, p. 98. Talking of a great many things, and I perceive all the world is against the Duke of Buckingham his acting thus high, and do prophesy nothing but ruin from it. But he do well observe that the church lands cannot certainly come to much, if the king shall persuaded to take them, they being leased out for long leases. By and by, after 2 hours, stay, they rose, having, as Wren tells me, resolved upon sending 6 ships to the Straits forthwith, not being contented with the peace upon the terms they demand, which are, that all our ships, where any Turks or Moors shall be found slaves, shall be prizes, which will imply that they must be searched. I hear that tomorrow the King and the Duke of York set out for Newmarket by 3 in the morning, to some foot and horse races, to be abroad 10 or 12 days. So I away, without seeing the Duke of York. But Mr. Wren showed me the order of council about the balancing the storekeeper's accounts, passed the council in the very terms I drew it, only I did put in my name as he that presented the book of hosiers preparing, and that is left out I mean, my name which is no great matter. So to my wife to Suffolk Street, where she was gone, and there I found them at supper, and eat a little with them, and so home, and there to bed, my cold pretty well gone. 8th, up and with W. Hewer by hackney coach to Whitehall, where the King and the Duke of York is gone by 3 in the morning, and had the misfortune to be overset with the Duke of York, the Duke of Monmouth, and the Prince at the King's Gate in Holborn, and the King all dirty, but no hurt. How it come to pass I know not, but only it was dark, and the torches did not, they say, light the coach as they should do. I thought this morning to have seen my Lord Sandwich before he went out of town, but I come half an hour too late, which troubles me, I having not seen him since my Lady Paul's died. So W. Hewer and I to the Harpen Ball, to drink my morning draught, having come out in haste, and there met with King, the Parliament man, with whom I had some impertinent talk. And so to the Privy Seal office, to examine what records I could find there, for my help in the great business I am put upon, of defending the present constitution of the Navy. But there could not have liberty without order from him that is in present waiting, Mr. Bickerstaff, who is out of town. This I did after I had walked to the New Exchange, and there met Mr. Moore, who went with me thither, and I find him the same discontented poor man as ever. He tells me that Mr. Shepley is upon being turned away from my lord's family, and another sent down, which I am sorry for, but his age and good fellowship have almost made him fit for nothing. Thence at unthanks my wife met me, and with our coach to my cousin Turner's, and there dined, and after dinner with my wife alone to the King's Playhouse, and there saw the Mock Astrologer, which I have often seen, and but an ordinary play, and so to my cousin Turner, S. again, where we met Roger Pepys, his wife, and 2 daughters, and there stayed and talked a little, and then home, and there my wife to read to me, my eyes being sensibly hurt by the 2 great lights of the playhouse. So to supper and to bed. 9th, up and to the Tower, and there find Sir W. Coventry alone, writing down his journal, which, he tells me, he now keeps of the material things. Upon which I told him, and he is the only man I ever told it to, I think, that I kept it most strictly these 8 or 10 years. And I am sorry almost that I told it him, it not being necessary, nor may be convenient to have it known. Here he showed me the petition he had sent to the king by my Lord Keeper, which was not to desire any admittance to employment, but submitting himself therein humbly to his majesty, but prayed the removal of his displeasure, and that he might be set free. He tells me that my Lord Keeper did acquaint the king with the substance of it, not showing him the petition, who answered that he was disposing of his employments, and when that was done, he might be led to discharge him. And this is what he expects, and what he seems to desire. But by this discourse he was pleased to take occasion to show me and read to me his account, which he hath kept by him under his own hand, of all his discourse, and the king's answers to him, upon the great business of my Lord Clarendon, and how he had first moved the Duke of York with it twice, at good distance, one after another, but without success, showing me thereby the simplicity and reasons of his so doing, and the manner of it. And the king's accepting it, telling him that he was not satisfied in his management, and did discover some dissatisfaction against him for his opposing the laying aside of my Lord Treasurer, at Oxford, which was a secret the king had not discovered. And really I was mighty proud to be privy to this great transaction, it giving me great conviction of the noble nature and ends of Sir W. Coventry in it, and considerations in general of the consequences of great men's actions, and the uncertainty of their estates, and other very serious considerations. From this to other discourse, and so to the office, where we sat all the morning, and after dinner by coach to my cousin Turner, S., thinking to have taken the young ladies to a play. But the was let blood today, and so my wife and I towards the King's Playhouse, and by the way found Betty and Bab and Betty Pepys staying for us, and so took them all to see Claricilla, which do not please me almost at all, though there are some good things in it. And so to my cousin Turner, S. again, and there find my Lady Mordaunt and her sister Johnson. And by comes in a gentleman, Mr. Overbury, a pleasant man, who plays most excellently on the flageolet, a little one, that sounded as low as one of mine, and mighty pretty. Hence by away, and with my wife and Bab, and Betty Pepys and W. Hewer, whom I carried all this day with me, to my cousin Stradwick, S., where I have not been ever since my brother Tom died, there being some difference between my father and them, upon the account of my cousin Scott. And I was glad of this opportunity of seeing them, they being good and substantial people, and kind, and here met my cousin Roger and his wife, and my cousin Turner, and here, which I never did before, I drank a glass of a pint, I believe, at one draught of the juice of oranges, of whose peel they make comfits. And here they drink the juice as wine with sugar, and it is very fine drink. But it being new, I was doubtful whether it might not do me hurt. Having stayed a while, my wife and I back, with my cousin Turner, etc., to her house, and there we took our leaves of my cousin Pepys, who goes with his wife and 2 daughters for Impington tomorrow. They are very good people, and people I love and am obliged to, and shall have great pleasure in their friendship, and particularly in hers, she being an understanding and good woman. So away home, and there after signing my letters, my eyes being bad, to supper and to bed. 10th, up, and by hackney coach to Auditor Beale's office in Holborn to look for records of the Navy, but he was out of the way, and so forced to go next to Whitehall to the Privy Seal. And after staying a little there, then to Westminster, where, at the Exchequer, I met with Mr. Newport and Major Halsey, and after doing a little business with Mr. Burgess, we by water to Whitehall, where I made a little stop. And so with them by coach to Temple Bar, where at the Sugar Loaf we dined, and W. Hewer with me. And there comes a companion of theirs, Colonel Vernon, I think they called him, a merry good fellow, and one that was very plain in cursing the Duke of Buckingham, and discoursing of his designs to ruin us, and that ruin must follow his counsels, and that we are an undone people. To which the others concurred, but not so plain, but all vexed at Sir W. Coventry's being laid aside. But Vernon, he is concerned, I perceive, for my Lord Ormond's being laid aside. But their company, being all old cavaliers, were very pleasant to hear how they swear and talk. But Halsey, to my content, tells me that my Lord Duke of Albemarle says that W. Coventry being gone, nothing will be well done at the Treasury, and I believe it. but they do all talk as that Duncombe, upon some pretence or other, must follow him. Thence to Auditor Beale, his house and office, but not to be found, and therefore to the Privy Seal at Whitehall, where, with W. Hewer and Mr. Gibson, who met me at the Temple, I spent the afternoon till evening looking over the books there, and did find several things to my purpose, though few of those I designed to find, the books being kept there in no method at all. Having done there, we by water home, and there find my cousin Turner and her 2 daughters come to see us. And there, after talking a little, I had my coach ready, and my wife and I, they going home, we out to Whitechapel to take a little air, though yet the dirtiness of the road do prevent most of the pleasure, which should have been from this tour. So home, and my wife to read to me till supper, and to bed. 11th, up and to Sir W. Coventry, to the Tower, where I walked and talked with him an hour alone, from one good thing to another. Who tells me that he hears that the commission is gone down to the king, with a blank to fill, for his place in the treasury. And he believes it will be filled with one of our treasurers of the navy, but which he knows not, but he believes it will be Osborne. We walk down to the stone walk, which is called, it seems, my Lord of Northumberland's walk, being paved by someone of that title that was prisoner there. And at the end of it there is a piece of iron upon the wall, with his arms upon it, and holes to put in a peg, for every turn that they make upon that walk. So away to the office, where busy all the morning, and so to dinner, and so very busy all the afternoon at my office, late, and then home tired, to supper with content with my wife, and so to bed, she pleasing me, though I dare not own it that she hath hired a chambermaid. But she, after many commendations, told me that she had one great fault, and that was that she was very handsome, at which I made nothing, but let her go on. But many times tonight she took occasion to discourse of her handsomeness, and the danger she was in by taking her, and that she did doubt yet whether it would be fit for her to take her. But I did assure her of my resolutions to have nothing to do with her maids, but in myself I was glad to have the content to have a handsome one to look on. 12th, up and abroad with my own coach to Auditor Beale's house, and thence with W. Hewer to his office, and there with great content spent all the morning looking over the navy accounts of several years, and the several patents of the treasurers, which was more than I did hope to have found there. About noon I ended there, to my great content, and giving the clerks their 20s. For their trouble, and having sent for W. How to me to discourse with him about the patent office records, wherein I remembered his brother to be concerned, I took him in my coach with W. Hewer and myself towards Westminster. And there he carried me to Knott's, the famous bookbinder, that bound for my Lord Chancellor's library. And here I did take occasion for curiosity to bespeak a book to be bound, only that I might have one of his binding. Thence back to Gray's Inn Knee, and at the next door at a cook's shop of house acquaintance we bespoke dinner, it being now 2 o'clock, and in the meantime he carried us into Gray's Inn Knee to his chamber, where I never was before, and it is very pretty and little and neat, as he was always. And so, after a little stay, and looking over a book or two there, we carried a piece of my Lord Coke with us, and to our dinner, where, after dinner, he read at my desire a chapter in my Lord Coke about perjury, wherein I did learn a good deal touching oaths, and so away to the patent office. In Chancery Lane, where his brother Jacky, being newly broke by running in debt and growing an idle rogue, he is forced to hide himself. And W. Howe do look after the office, and here I did set a clerk to look out some things for me in their books, while W. Hewer and I to the Crown offices where we met with several good things that I most wanted, and did take short notes of the dockets, and so back to the patent office, and did the like there, and by candlelight ended. And so home, where, thinking to meet my wife with content, after my pains all this day, I find her in her closet, alone, in the dark, in a hot fit of railing against me, upon some news she has this day heard of Deb. S. living very fine, and with black spots, and speaking ill words of her mistress, which with good reason might vex her. And the baggage is to blame, but, God knows, I know nothing of her, nor what she do, nor what becomes of her, though God knows that my devil that is within me do wish that I could. Yet God I hope will prevent me therein, for I dare not trust myself with it if I should know it. But, what with my high words, and slighting it, and then serious, I did at last bring her to very good and kind terms, poor heart. And I was heartily glad of it, for I do see there is no man can be happier than myself, if I will, with her. But in her fit she did tell me what vexed me all the night, that this had put her upon putting off her handsome maid and hiring another that was full of the small pox, which did mightily vex me, though I said nothing, and do still. So down to supper, and she to read to me, and then with all possible kindness to bed. 13th. Up and to the Tower to see Sir W. Coventry, and with him talking of business of the navy, all alone an hour he taking physic. And so away to the office where all the morning, and then home to dinner with my people, and so to the office again, and there all the afternoon till night, when comes by mistake my cousin Turner and her 2 daughters, which love such freaks, to eat some anchovies and ham of bacon with me, instead of noon at dinner, when I expected them. But however, I had done my business before they come, and so was in good humor enough to be with them, and so home to them to supper, and pretty merry, being pleased to see Betty Turner, which hath something mighty pretty. But that which put me in good humor, both at noon and night, is the fancy that I am this day made a captain of one of the king's ships, Mr. Wren having this day sent me, the Duke of York's commission to be captain of the Jersey, in order to my being of a court-martial for examining the loss of the defiance and other things, which do give me occasion of much mirth, and may be of some use to me, at least I shall get a little money by it for the time I have it. It being designed that I must really be a captain to be able to sit in this court. They stayed till about 8 at night, and then away, and my wife to read to me, and then to bed in mighty good humor, but for my eyes. 14th Lord's Day. Up, and to my office with Tom, whom I made to read to me the books of propositions in the time of the Grand Commission, which I did read a good part of before church, and then with my wife to church, where I did see my milliner's wife come again, which pleased me. But I durst not be seen to mind her for fear of my wife seeing me, though the woman I did never speak 20 words to, and that but only in her husband's shop. But so fearful I am of discontenting my wife, or giving her cause of jealousy. But here we heard a most excellent good sermon of Mr. Gifford S. upon the righteousness of scribes and Pharisees. So home to dinner and to work again, and so till dinner, where W. Howe come and dined with me, and stayed and read in my Lord Cook upon his chapter of perjury again, which pleased me, and so parted, and I to my office. And there made an end of the books of propositions, which did please me mightily to hear read, they being excellently writ and much to the purpose, and yet so as I think I shall make good use of his defense of our present constitution. About 4 o'clock took coach to visit my cousin Turner, and I out with her to make a visit, but the lady she went to see was abroad. So back and to talk with her and her daughters, and then home, and she and I to walk in the garden the first time this year, the weather being mighty temperate, and then I to write down my journal for the last week, my eyes being very bad, and therefore I forced to find a way to use by turns with my tube, one after another, and so home to supper and to bed. Before I went from my office this night, I did tell Tom my resolution not to keep him after Jane was gone, but shall do well by him, which pleases him, and I think he will presently marry her, and go away out of my house with her. 15th. Up and by water with W. Hewer to the Temple, and thence to the Rolls, where I made inquiry for several rolls, and was soon informed in the manner of it. And so spent the whole morning with W. Hewer, he taking little notes in shorthand, while I hired a clerk there to read to me about 12 or more several rolls which I did call for. And it was great pleasure to me to see the method wherein their rolls are kept. That when the master of the office, one Mr. Case, do call for them, who is a man that I have heretofore known by coming to my Lord of Sandwich, S., he did most readily turn to them. At noon they shut up, and W. Hewer and I did walk to the Cock at the end of Suffolk Street, where I never was, a great ordinary mightily cried up and there bespoke a pullet, which while dressing he and I walked into St. James's Park, and thence back and dined very handsome with a good soup and a pullet for 4s. 6d. The whole. Thence back to the Rolls and did a little more business, and so by water to Whitehall, whither I went to speak with Mr. Williamson, that if he hath any papers relating to the navy I might see them, which he promises me. And so by water home, with great content for what I have this day found, having got almost as much as I desire of the history of the navy, from 1618 to 1642, when the king and parliament fell out. So home, and did get my wife to read, and so to supper and to bed. 16th. Up, and to the office, after having visited Sir W. Coventry at the Tower, and walked with him upon the stone walk, alone, till other company come to him, and had very good discourse with him. At noon home, where my wife and Jane gone abroad, and Tom, in order to their buying of things for their wedding, which, upon my discourse the last night, is now resolved to be done, upon the 26th of this month, the day of my solemnity for my cutting of the stone, when my cousin Turner must be with us. My wife, therefore, not at dinner, and comes to me Mr. Evelyn of Deptford, a worthy good man, and dined with me, but a bad dinner, who is grieved for, and speaks openly to me his thoughts of, the times and our ruin approaching, and all by the folly of the king. His business to me was about some ground of his, at Deptford, next to the King's Yard, and after dinner we parted. My sister Mitchell coming also this day to see us, whom I left there, and I away down by water with W. Hewer to Woolwich, where I have not been I think more than a year or two, and here I saw, but did not go on board my ship, the Jersey, she lying at the wharf under repair. But my business was to speak with Ackworth, about some old things and passages in the Navy, for my information therein, in order to my great business now of stating the history of the Navy. This I did, and upon the whole do find that the late times in all their management were not more husbandly than we, and other things of good content to me. His wife was sick, and so I could not see her. Thence, after seeing Mr. Sheldon, I to Greenwich by water, and there landed at the King's House, which goes on slow, but is very pretty. The old palace at Greenwich had just been pulled down, and a new building commenced by Charles Roman II, only one wing of which was completed, at the expense of L36000, under the auspices of Webb, Inigo Jones's kinsman and executor. In 1694, the unfinished edifice was granted by William and Mary to trustees for the use and service of a naval hospital, and it has been repeatedly enlarged and improved till it has arrived at its present splendor. I to the park, there to see the prospect of the hill, to judge of Danker's picture, which he hath made thereof for me, and I do like it very well, and it is a very pretty place. Thence to Deptford, but stayed not, Uthwaite being out of the way. And so home, and then to the Ship Tavern, Morris, S., and stayed till W. Hewer fetched his uncle Blackburn by appointment to me, to discourse of the business of the Navy in the late times. And he did do it by giving me a most exact account in writing of the several turns in the Admiralty and Navy, of the persons employed therein, from the beginning of the King, S. leaving the Parliament, to his son's coming in, to my great content. And now I am fully informed in all I at present desire. We fell to other talk, and I find by him that the bishops must certainly fall, and their hierarchy. These people have got so much ground upon the king and kingdom as is not to be got again from them, and the bishops do well deserve it. But it is all the talk, I find, that Dr. Wilkins, my friend, the Bishop of Chester, shall be removed to Winchester, and be Lord Treasurer. Though this be foolish talk, yet I do gather that he is a mighty rising man, as being a latitudinarian, and the Duke of Buckingham his great friend. Here we stayed talking till 2 at night, where I did never drink before since this man come to the house, though for his pretty wife's sake I do fetch my wine from this, whom I could not nevertheless get Parisy tonight, though her husband did seem to call for her. So parted here, and I home, and to supper, and to bed. 17th. Up, and by water to see Mr. Wren, and then Mr. Williamson, who did show me the very original books of propositions made by the commissioners for the Navy in 1618, to my great content, but no other Navy papers he could now show me. Thence to Westminster by water and to the Hall, where Mrs. Mitchell do surprise me with the news that Doll Lane is suddenly brought to bed at her sister's lodging, and gives it out that she is married, but there is no such thing certainly, she never mentioning it before, but I have cause to rejoice that I have not seen her a great while, she having several times desired my company, but I doubt to an evil end. Thence to the Exchequer, where W. Hewer come to me, and after a little business did go by water home, and there dined, and took my wife by a hackney to the King's Playhouse, and saw the Coxcomb, the first time acted, but an old play and a silly one being acted only by the young people. Here met cousin Turner and the. So parted there from them, and home by coach and to my letters at the office, where pretty late, and so to supper and to bed. 18th. Up, and to see Sir W. Coventry, and walked with him a good while in the stone walk, and brave discourse about my Lord Chancellor, and his ill managements and mistakes, and several things of the Navy, and thence to the office, where we sat all the morning, and so home to dinner. where my wife mighty finely dressed by a maid that she hath taken, and is to come to her when Jane goes. And the same she the other day told me of, to be so handsome. I therefore longed to see her, but did not till after dinner, that my wife and I going by coach, she went with us to Holborn, where we set her down. She is a mighty proper maid, and pretty comely, but so, but hath a most pleasing tone of voice, and speaks handsomely, but hath most great hands, and I believe ugly, but very well dressed, and good clothes, and the maid I believe will please me well enough. Thence to visit Ned Pickering and his lady, and Creed and his wife, but the former abroad, and the latter out of town, gone to my Lady Pickering S. in Northamptonshire, upon occasion of the late death of their brother, Oliver Pickering, a youth that is dead of the smallpox. So my wife and I to Dankers to see the pictures, and thence to Hyde Park, the first time we were there this year, or ever in our own coach, where with mighty pride rode up and down, and many coaches there, and I thought our horses and coaches pretty as any there, and observed so to be by others. Here stayed till night, and so home, and to the office where busy late, and so home to supper and to bed, with great content, but much business in my head of the office, which troubles me. 19th. Up and by water to Whitehall, there to the Lords of the Treasury, and did some business. And here Sir Thomas Clifford did speak to me, as desirous that I would some time come and confer with him about the navy, which I am glad of, but will take the direction of the Duke of York before I do it, though I would be glad to do something to secure myself, if I could, in my employment. Thence to the Plaisterers, and took my face and my Lord Duke of Albemarle's home with me by coach, they being done to my mind. And mighty glad I am of understanding this way of having the pictures of any friends. At home to dinner, where Mr. Shears dined with us, but after dinner I left him and my wife, and with Commissioner Middleton and Kempthorne to a court-martial, to which, by virtue of my late captainship, I am called, the first I was ever at, where many commanders and Kempthorne president. Here was tried a difference between Sir L. Van Hemskirk, the Dutch captain who commands the Nonsuch, built by his direction, and his lieutenant, a drunken kind of silly business. We ordered the lieutenant to ask him pardon, and have resolved to lay before the Duke of York what concerns the captain, which was striking of his lieutenant, and challenging him to fight, which comes not within any article of the laws martial. But upon discourse, the other day with Sir W. Coventry, I did advise Middleton, and he and I did forbear to give judgment. But after the debate did withdraw into another cabin, the court being held in one of the yachts, which was on purpose brought up over against St. Catharine's, it being to be feared that this precedent of our being made captains, in order to the trying of the loss of the defiance, wherein we are the proper persons to inquire into the want of instructions while ships do lie in harbour, evil use might be hereafter made of the precedent by putting the Duke of Buckingham, or any of these rude fellows that now are uppermost, to make packed courts, by captains made on purpose to serve their turns. The other cause was of the loss of the Providence at Tangier, where the captain, being by chance on shore, may prove very inconvenient to him, for example's sake, though the man be a good man, and one whom, for Norwood's sake, I would be kind to. But I will not offer anything to the excusing such a miscarriage. He is at present confined, till he can bring better proofs on his behalf of the reasons of his being on shore. So Middleton and I away to the office, and there I late busy, making my people, as I have done lately, to read Mr. Holland's Discourse of the Navy, and what other things I can get to inform me fully in all. And here late, about 8 at night, comes Mr. Wren to me, who had been at the Tower to Coventry. He come only to see how matters go, and tells me, as a secret, that last night the Duke of York's closet was broken open, and his cabinets and shut again, one of them that the rogue that did it hath left plate and a watch behind him, and therefore they fear that it was only for papers, which looks like a very malicious business in design, to hurt the Duke of York. But they cannot know that till the Duke of York comes to town about the papers, and therefore make no words of it. He gone, I to work again, and then to supper at home, and to bed. 20th. Up and to the Tower to W. Coventry, and there walked with him alone, on the stone walk, till company come to him. And there about the business of the navy discoursed with him, and about my Lord Chancellor and Treasurer. That they were against the war at first, declaring, as wise men and statesmen, at first to the king, that they thought it fit to have a war with them at some time or other, but that it ought not to be till we found the crowns of Spain and France together by the bears, the want of which did ruin our war. But then he told me that, a great deal before the war, my Lord Chancellor did speak of a war with some heat, as a thing to be desired, and did it upon a belief that he could with his speeches make the Parliament give what money he pleased, and do what he would, or would make the king desire. But he found himself soon deceived of the Parliament, they having a long time before his removal been cloyed with his speeches and good words, and were come to hate him. Sir W. Coventry did tell me it, as the wisest thing that ever was said to the king by any statesman of his time, and it was by my Lord Treasurer that is dead, whom, I find, he takes for a very great statesman that, when the king did show himself forward for passing the Act of Indemnity, he did advise the king that he would hold his hand in doing it, till he had got his power restored, that had been diminished by the late times, and his revenue settled in such a manner as he might depend on himself, without resting upon parliaments, and then pass it. But my Lord Chancellor, who thought he could have the command of parliaments forever, because for the king's sake they were a while willing to grant all the king desired, did press for its being done. And so it was, and the king from that time able to do nothing with the parliament almost. Thence to the office, where sat all the forenoon, and then home to dinner, and so to the office, where late busy, and so home, mightily pleased with the news brought me tonight, that the king and Duke of York are come back this afternoon, and no sooner come, but a warrant was sent to the Tower for the releasing Sir W. Coventry, which do put me in some hopes that there may be, in this absence, some accommodation made between the Duke of York and the Duke of Buckingham and Arlington. So home, to supper and to bed. 21st, Lord's Day. Up, and by water over to Southwark, and then, not getting a boat, I forced to walk to Stangate, and so over to Whitehall in a scull, where up to the Duke of York's dressing-room, and there met Harry Savile, and understand that Sir W. Coventry is come to his house last night. I understand by Mr. Wren that his friends having, by Secretary Trevor and my Lord Keeper, applied to the king upon his first coming home, and a promise made that he should be discharged this day, my Lord Arlington did anticipate them, by sending a warrant presently for his discharge, which looks a little like kindness, or a desire of it, which God send. Though I fear the contrary, however, my heart is glad that he is out. Thence up and down the house. Met with Mr. May, who tells me the story of his being put by Sir John Denham's place, of surveyor of the king's works, who it seems is lately dead, by the unkindness of the Duke Buckingham, who hath brought in Dr. Wren. Though he tells me, he hath been his servant for 20 years together in all his wants and dangers, saving him from want of bread by his care and management, and with a promise of having his help in his advancement, and an engagement under his hand for L1,000 not yet paid, and yet the Duke of Buckingham so ungrateful as to put him by, which is an ill thing, though Dr. Wren is a worthy man. But he tells me that the king is kind to him, and hath promised him a pension of L300 a year out of the works, which will be of more content to him than the place, which, under their present wants of money, is a place that disobliges most people, being not able to do what they desire to their lodgings. Here meeting with Sir H. Comely and Povey, that tell me that my Lord Middleton is resolved in the cabal that he shall not go to Tangier, and that Sir Edward Harlow, whom I know not, is propounded to go, who was governor of Dunkirk, and, they say, a most worthy brave man, which I shall be very glad of. So by water H. Russell coming for me, home to dinner, where W. Howe comes to dine with me, and after dinner propounds to me my lending him L500, to help him to purchase a place the master of the patent office, of Sir Richard Pigott. I did give him a civil answer, but shall think twice of it, and the more, because of the changes we are like to have in the navy, which will not make it fit for me to divide the little I have left more than I have done, God knowing what my condition is, I having not attended, and now not being able to examine what my state is, of my accounts, and being in the world, which troubles me mightily. He gone, I to the office to enter my journal for a week. News is lately come of the Algerines taking L3,000 in money, out of one of our company's East India ships, outward bound, which will certainly make the war last, which I am sorry for, being so poor as we are, and broken in pieces. At night my wife to read to me, and then to supper, where Pelling comes to see and sup with us, and I find that he is assisting my wife in getting a license to our young people to be married this Lent, which is resolved shall be done upon Friday next, my great day, or feast, for my being cut of the stone. So after supper to bed, my eyes being very bad. 22nd. Up and by water with W. Newer to Whitehall, there to attend the Lords of the Treasury. But before they sat, I did make a step to see Sir W. Coventry at his house, where, I bless God, he is come again, but in my way I met him, and so he took me into his coach and carried me to Whitehall, and there set me down where he ought not at least, he hath not yet leave to come, nor hath thought fit to ask it, hearing that Henry Savile is not only denied to kiss the king's hand, but the king, being asked it by the Duke of York, did deny it, and directed that the Duke shall not receive him, to wait upon him in his chamber, till further orders. Sir W. Coventry told me that he was going to visit Sir John Trevor, who hath been kind to him, and he showed me a long list of all his friends that he must this week make visits to, that come to visit him in the Tower, and seems mighty well satisfied with his being out of business, but I hope he will not long be so. At least, I do believe that all must go to rat if the king do not come to see the want of such a servant. Thence to the Treasury Chamber, and there all the morning to my great grief, put to do Sir G. Downing's work of dividing the customs for this year, between the Navy, the Ordnance, and Tangier. But it did so trouble my eyes, that I had rather have given L20 than have had it to do. But I did thereby oblige Sir Thomas Clifford and Sir J. Duncombe, and so am glad of the opportunity to recommend myself to the former, for the latter I need not, he loving me well already. At it till noon, here being several of my brethren with me, but doing nothing, but I all. But this day I did also represent to our treasurers, which was read here, a state of the charge of the Navy, and what the expense of it this year would likely be, which is done so as it will appear well done and to my honor, for so the Lords did take it, and I oblige the treasurers by doing it, at their request. Thence with W. Hewer at noon to Unthanks, where my wife stays for me, and so to the Cock, where there was no room, and thence to King Street to several cooks' shops, where nothing to be had, and at last to the corner shop, going down Ivy Lane by my Lord of Salisbury, S., and there got a good dinner my wife and W. Newer and I, and after dinner she with her coach home, and he and I to look over my papers for the East India Company, against the afternoon. Which done, I with them to Whitehall, and there to the Treasury Chamber, where the East India Company and 3 councillors pleaded against me alone, for 3 or 4 hours, till 7 at night, before the Lords. And the Lords did give me the conquest on behalf of the king, but could not come to any conclusion, the company being stiff, and so I think we shall go to law with them. This done, and my eyes mighty bad with this day's work, I to Mr. Wren, S., and then up to the Duke of York. And there with Mr. Wren did propound to him my going to Chatham tomorrow with Commissioner Middleton, and so this week to make the pay there, and examine the business of the defiance being lost, and other businesses, which I did the rather, that I might be out of the way at the wedding, and be at a little liberty myself for a day, or 2, to find a little pleasure, and give my eyes a little ease. The Duke of York mightily satisfied with it, and so away home, where my wife troubled at my being so late abroad, poor woman, though never more busy, but I satisfied her, and so begun to put things in order for my journey tomorrow, and so, after supper, to bed. 23rd. Up, and to my office to do a little business there, and so, my things being all ready, I took coach with Commissioner Middleton, Captain Tinker, and Mr. Hutchinson, a hackney coach, and over the bridge, and so out towards Chatham, and dined at Dartford, where we stayed an hour or 2, it being a cold day, and so on, and got to Chatham just at night, with very good discourse by the way, but mostly of matters of religion, wherein Hutchinson his vein lies. After supper, we fell to talk of spirits and apparitions, whereupon many pretty particular stories were told, so as to make me almost afeard to lie alone, but for shame I could not help it. And so to bed, and, being sleepy, fell soon to rest, and so rested well. 24th. Up, and walked abroad in the garden, and find that Mrs. Tooker has not any of her daughters here as I expected, and so walked to the yard, leaving Middleton at the pay, and there I only walked up and down the yard, and then to the Hill House, and there did give order for the coach to be made ready, and got Mr. Gibson, whom I carried with me, to go with me and Mr. Coney, the surgeon, towards Maidstone, which I had a mighty mind to see, and took occasion, in my way, at St. Margaret's, to pretend to call to see Captain Allen to see whether Mrs. Jowls, his daughter, was there. And there his wife come to the door, he being at London, and through a window I spied Jowls, but took no notice of he, but made excuse till night, and then promised to come and see Mrs. Allen again, and so away, it being a mighty cold and windy but clear day. And had the pleasure of seeing the Medway running, winding up and down mightily, and a very fine country. And I went a little out of the way to have visited Sir John Banks, but he at London. But here I had a sight of his seat and house, the outside, which is an old abbey just like Hinchingbrooke, and as good at least, and mighty finely placed by the river. And he keeps the grounds about it, and walls and the house, very handsome. I was mightily pleased with the sight of it. Thence to Maidstone, which I had a mighty mind to see, having never been there, and walked all up and down the town, and up to the top of the steeple, and had a noble view, and then down again. And in the town did see an old man beating of flax, and did step into the barn and give him money, and saw that piece of husbandry which I never saw, and it is very pretty. In the street also I did buy and send to our Inni, the Bell, a dish of fresh fish. And so, having walked all round the town and found it very pretty, as most towns I ever saw, though not very big and people of good fashion in it, we to our Inni to dinner and had a good dinner. And after dinner a barber come to me, and there trimmed me, that I might be clean against night to go to Mrs. Allen. And so, staying till about 4 o'clock, we set out, I alone in the coach going and coming, and in our way back, I light out of the way to see a Saxon monument. Kitscotty House, a cromlech in Aylesford Parish, Kent, on a hillside adjacent to the river Medway, 3.5 miles N by W, of Maidstone. It consists of 3 upright stones and an overlying one, and forms a small chamber open in front. It is supposed to have been the center of a group of monuments indicating the burial place of the Belgian settlers in this part of Britain. Other stones of a similar character exist in the neighborhood. As they say, of a king, which is 3 stones standing upright, and a great round one lying on them, of great bigness, although not so big as those on Salisbury Plain. But certainly it is a thing of great antiquity, and I mightily glad to see it. It is near to Aylesford, where Sir John Banks lives. So homeward, and stopped again at Captain Allen S., and there, light, and sent the coach and Gibson home, and I and Coney stayed. And there comes to us Mrs. Jowls, who is a very fine, proper lady, as most I know, and well dressed. Here was also a gentleman, one Major Manley, and his wife, neighbors. And here we stayed, and drank and talked, and set Coney and him to play while Mrs. Jowls and I to talk, and there had all our old stories up. And there I had the liberty to salute her often, and pull off her glove, where her hand mighty moist, and she mighty free in kindness to me, and ye do not at all doubt that I might have had that I would have desired to had I had time to have carried her to Cobham, as she, upon my proposing it, was very willing to go, for is a whore, that is certain. But a very brave and comely one. Here was a pretty cousin of hers come in to supper also, of a great fortune, daughter-in-law to this Manly, mighty pretty, but had now such a cold, she could not speak. Here mightily pleased with Mrs. Jowls, and did get her to the street door, and there to her Sioux breasts, and baser her without any force, and credo that I might have had all else, but it was not time nor place. Here stayed till almost 12 at night, and then with a lanthorn from thence walked over the fields, as dark as pitch, and mighty cold and snow, to Chatham and Mr. Coney with great kindness to me. And they're all in bed before I come home, and so I presently to bed. 25th. Up and by, about 8 o'clock, come Rear Admiral Kempthorne and 7 captains more, by the Duke of York's order, as we expected, to hold the court-martial about the loss of the Defiance. And so presently we by boat to the Charles, which lies over against Upnor Castle, and there we fell to the business. And there I did manage the business, the Duke of York having, by special order, directed them to take the assistance of Commissioner Middleton and me, forasmuch as there might be need of advice in what relates to the government of the ships in harbor. And so I did lay the law open to them, and rattle the master attendants out of their wits almost, and made the trial last till 7 at night, not eating a bit all the day. Only when we had done examination, and I given my thoughts that the neglect of the gunner of the ship was as great as I thought any neglect could be, which might by the law deserve death, but Commissioner Middleton did declare that he was against giving the sentence of death, we withdrew, as not being of the court, and so left them to do what they pleased. And, while they were debating it, the boatswain of the ship did bring us out of the kettle a piece of hot salt beef, and some brown bread and brandy. And there we did make a little meal, but so good as I never would desire to eat better meat while I live, only I would have cleaner dishes. By and by they had done, and called us down from the quarterdeck. And there we find they do sentence that the gunner of the Defiance should stand upon the Charles 3 hours with his fault writ upon his breast, and with a halter about his neck, and so be made incapable of any office. The truth is, the man do seem and is, I believe, a good man, but his neglect in trusting a girl to carry fire into his cabin is not to be pardoned. This being done, we took boat and home, and there a good supper was ready for us, which should have been our dinner. The captains, desirous to be at London, went away presently for Gravesend to get thither by this night's tide, and so we to supper, it having been a great snowy and mighty cold, foul day, and so after supper to bed. 26th. Up, and with Middleton all the morning at the dock, looking over the storehouses and Commissioner Pett's house, in order to Captain Cox's coming to live there in his stead, as commissioner. But it is a mighty pretty house, and pretty to see how everything is said to be out of repair for this new man, though L10 would put it into as good condition in everything as it ever was in, so free every body is of the king's money. By and by to Mr. Wilson's, and there drank, but did not see his wife, nor any woman in the yard, and so to dinner at the Hill House. And after dinner, till 8 at night, Close, Middleton, and I, examining the business of Mr. Pett about selling a boat, and we find him a very knave, and some other quarrels of his, wherein, to justify himself, he hath made complaints of others. This being done, we to supper, and so to talk, Commissioner Middleton being mighty good company upon a journey, and so to bed, thinking how merry my people are at this time, putting Tom and Jane to bed, being to have been married this day, it being also my feast for my being cut of the stone, but how many years I do not remember, but I think it to be about 10 or 11. 27th. Up and did a little business, Middleton and I then, after drinking a little buttered ale, he and Hutchinson and I took coach and exceeding merry in talk to Dartford, Middleton finding stories of his own life at Barbados and up and down at Venice and elsewhere that are mighty pretty and worth hearing, and he is a strange good companion, and droll upon the road, more than ever I could have thought to have been in him. Here we dined and met Captain Allen of Rochester, who dined with us, and so went on his journey homeward, and we by and by took coach again and got home about 6 at night, it being all the morning as cold, snowy, windy, and rainy day as any in the whole winter past, but pretty clear in the afternoon. I find all well, but my wife abroad with Jane, who was married yesterday, and I to the office busy, till by and by my wife comes home, and so home, and there hear how merry they were yesterday, and I glad at it, they being married, it seems, very handsomely at Islington, and dined at the old house, and lay in our blue chamber, with much company and wonderful merry. The Turner and Mary Batelier bridesmaids, and Talbot Pepys and W. Hewer bridesmen. Anon to supper and to bed, my head a little troubled with the muchness of the business I have upon me at present. So to bed. 28th, Lord's Day. Lay long talking with pleasure with my wife, and so up and to the office with Tom, who looks mighty smug upon his marriage, as Jane also do, both of whom I did give joy, and so Tom and I at work at the office all the morning, till dinner, and then dined W. Batelier with us. And so after dinner to work again, and sent for Gibson, and kept him also till 8 at night, doing much business. And so, that being done, and my journal writ, my eyes being very bad, and every day worse and worse, I fear. But I find it most certain that strong drinks do make my eyes sore, as they have done heretofore always. For, when I was in the country, when my eyes were at the best, their strong beer would make my eyes sore. So home to supper, and by to bed. 29th. Up and by water to Whitehall, and there to the Duke of York, to show myself after my journey to Chatham, but did no business today with him. Only after gone from him, I to Sir T. Clifford's. And there, after an hour's waiting, he being alone in his closet, I did speak with him, and give him the account he gave me to draw up, and he did like it very well. And then fell to talk of the business of the navy, and giving me good words, did fall foul of the Constitution, and did then discover his thoughts, that Sir J. Minns was too old, and so was Colonel Middleton, and that my Lord Brouncker did mind his mathematics too much. I did not give much encouragement to that of finding fault with my fellow officers, but did stand up for the Constitution, and did say that what faults there were in our office would be found not to arise from the Constitution, but from the failures of the officers in whose hands it was. This he did seem to give good ear to, but did give me of myself very good words, which pleased me well, though I shall not build upon them anything. Thence home, and after dinner by water with Tom down to Greenwich, he reading to me all the way, coming and going, my collections out of the Duke of York's old manuscript of the Navy, which I have bound up, and do please me mightily. At Greenwich I come to Captain Cox, where the house full of company, at the burial of James Temple, who, it seems, hath been dead these 5 days here. I had a very good ring, which I did give my wife as soon as I come home. I spent my time there walking in the garden, talking with James Pierce, who tells me that he is certain that the Duke of Buckingham had been with his wenches all the time that he was absent, which was all the last week, nobody knowing where he was. The great talk is of the king's being hot of late against conventicles, and to see whether the Duke of Buckingham's being returned will turn the king, which will make him very popular. And some think it is his plot to make the king thus, to show his power in the making him change his mind. But Pierce did tell me that the king did certainly say that he that took 1 stone from the church did take 2 from his crown. By and by the corpse come out, and I, with Sir Richard Browne and Mr. Evelyn, in their coach to the church, where Mr. Plume preached. But I, in the midst of the sermon, did go out, and walked all alone, round to Diptford, thinking Para have seen the wife of Bagwell, which I did at her door, but I could not conveniently go into her house, and so lost my labour. And so to the King's Yard, and there my boat by order met me. And home, where I made my boy to finish my manuscript, and so to supper and to bed my new chambermaid, that comes in the room of Jane, is come, Jane and Tom lying at their own lodging this night. The new maid's name is Matt, a proper and very comely maid. This day also our cook maid Bridget went away, which I was sorry for, but just at her going she was found to be a thief, and so I was the less trouble for it. But now our whole house will, in a manner, be new, which, since Jane is gone, I am not at all sorry for that my late differences with my wife about poor Deb will not be remembered. So to bed after supper, and to sleep with great content. 30th, up, and to Sir W. Coventry, to see and discourse with him, and he tells me that he hath lately been with my Lord Keeper, and had much discourse about the navy. And particularly he tells me that he finds they are divided touching me and my Lord Brounker. Some are for removing, and some for keeping us. He told my Lord Keeper that it would cost the king L10000 before he hath made another as fit to serve him in the navy as I am. Which, though I believe it is true, yet I am much pleased to have that character given me by W. Coventry, whatever be the success of it. But I perceive they do think that I know too much, and shall impose upon whomever shall come next, and therefore must be removed, though he tells me that Sir T. Clifford is inclined well enough to me, and Sir T. Osborne, by what I have lately done, I suppose. This news do a little trouble me, but yet, when I consider it, it is but what I ought not to be much troubled for, considering my incapacity, in regard to my eyes, to continue long at this work. And this, when I think of and talk with my wife, do make me the less troubled for it. After some talk of the business of the navy more with him, I away and to the office, where all the morning, and Sir W. Penn, the first time that he hath been here since his being last sick, which I think is 2 or 3 months, and I think will be the last that he will be here as one of the board, he now inviting us all to dine with him, as a parting dinner on Thursday next, which I am glad of, I am sure, for he is a very villain. At noon home to dinner, where, and at the office, all the afternoon, troubled at what I have this morning heard, at least my mind full of thoughts upon it, and so at night after supper to bed. 31st, up and by water to Sir W. Coventry's, there to talk with him about business of the navy, and received from him direction what to advise the Duke of York at this time, which was, to submit and give way to the king's naming a man or two, that the people about him have a mind should be brought into the navy, and perhaps that may stop their fury in running further against the whole. And this, he believes, will do it. After much discourse with him, I walked out with him into St. James's Park, where, being afeard to be seen with him, he having not leave yet to kiss the king's hand. But notice taken, as I hear, of all that go to him, I did take the pretence of my attending the Tangier committee, to take my leave, though to serve him I should, I think, stick at nothing. At the committee, this morning, my Lord Middleton declares at last his being ready to go, as soon as ever money can be made ready to pay the garrison. And so I have orders to get money, but how soon I know not. Thence home, and there find Mr. Shears, for whom I find my moher of late to talk with mighty kindness. And particularly he hath shewn himself to be a poet, and that she do mightily value him for. He did not stay to dine with us, but we to dinner. And then, in the afternoon, my wife being very well dressed by her new maid, we abroad to make a visit to Mrs. Pickering. But she abroad again, and so we never yet saw her. Thence to Dankers, and there saw our pictures which are in doing, and I did choose a view of Rome instead of Hampton Court, and mightily pleased I shall be in them. Here were Sir Charles Cotterell and his son bespeaking something, both ingenious men. Thence my wife and I to the park, and pretty store of company, and so home with great content the month, my mind in pretty good content for all things, but the designs on foot to bring alterations in the office, which troubles me. April 1669. April 1st. Up and with Colonel Middleton at the desire of Rear Admiral Kempthorne, the President for our assisting them, to the court-martial on board a yacht in the river here, to try the business of the purser's complaints. Baker against Trevanion, his commander, of the Dartmouth. But, Lord, to see what wretched doings there were among all the commanders to ruin the purser, and defend the captain in all his rogueries, be it to the prejudice of the king or purser, no good man could bear. I confess I was pretty high, which did not at least the young gentleman commander like, and Middleton did the like. But could not bring it to any issue this day, sitting till 2 o'clock, and therefore we being sent for, went to Sir W. Penn's by invitation to dine, where my wife was, and my Lord Brouncker and his mistress, and Sir J. Minns and his niece, and here a bad dinner and little mirth, I being little pleased with my host. However, I made myself sociable, and so, after dinner, my wife and I, with my Lord Brouncker and his mistress, they set us down at my cousin Turner S., and there we stayed a while and talked. And particularly here we met with Dr. Ball, the parson of the temple, who did tell me a great many pretty stories about the manner of the parsons being paid for their preaching at Paul's heretofore. And now, and the ground of the lecture, and heretofore the names of the founders thereof, which were many, at some 5s, some 6s, per annum towards it, and had their names read in the pulpit every sermon among those holy persons that the church do order a collect for, giving God thanks for. By and by comes by my desire Commissioner Middleton's coach and horses for us, and we went with it towards the park, thinking to have met the Turner and Betty, but did not, so turned back again to their lodging, and there found them and Mr. Baitlier, and there, after a little talk, we took leave and carry Baitlier home with us. So to supper, and so to bed. Second, up and by water to Whitehall, and there with the office attended the Duke of York, and stayed in Whitehall till about noon, and so with W. Hewer to the Cock, and there he and I dined alone with great content, he reading to me, for my memory's sake, my late collections of the history of the Navy, that I might represent the same by and by to the Duke of York. And so, after dinner, he and I to Whitehall, and there to the Duke of York's lodgings, whither he by and by his appointment come. And alone with him an hour in his closet, telling him mine and W. Coventry's advice touching the present posture of the Navy, as the Duke of Buckingham and the rest do now labor to make changes therein, and that it were best for him to suffer the king to be satisfied with the bringing in of a man or two which they desire. I did also give the Duke of York a short account of the history of the Navy as to our office, wherewith he was very well satisfied. But I do find that he is pretty stiff against their bringing in of men against his mind, as the treasures were, and particularly against Childs, coming in, because he is a merchant. After much discourse with him, we parted, and the council, while I stayed waiting for his telling me when I should be ready to give him a written account of the administration of the navy. This caused me to wait the whole afternoon, till night. In the meantime, stepping to the Duchess of York's side to speak with Lady Peterborough, I did see the young Duchess, a little child in hanging sleeves, dance most finely, so as almost to ravish me, her ears were so good. Taught by a Frenchman that did heretofore teach the king, and all the king's children, and the queen mother herself, who do still dance well. Thence to the council door, and Mr. Chevens took me into the back stairs, and they with his friend Mr. Fawkes, for whom he is very solicitous in some things depending in this office. He did make me, with some others that he took in, among others, Alderman Backwell, eat a pickled herring, the largest I ever saw, and drink variety of wines till I was almost merry. But I did keep in good tune. And so, after the council was up, I home. And there find my wife not yet come home from Deptford. She hath been all this day to see her mother, but she come and by, and so to talk, and supper, and to bed. This night I did bring home from the king's potticary, in Whitehall by Mr. Cooling's direction, a water that he says did him mighty good for his eyes. I pray God it may do me good, but by his description his disease was the same as mine, and this do encourage me to use it. Third, up and to the council of war again with Middleton. But the proceedings of the commanders so devilishly bad and so professedly partial to the captain that I could endure it no longer, but took occasion to pretend business at the office, and away, and Colonel Middleton with me, who was of the same mind, and resolved to declare our minds freely to the Duke of York about it. So to the office, where we sat all the morning. Then home to dinner, and so back to the office, where busy late till night, and so home to supper and to bed. Fourth, Lord's Day. Up and to church, where Alderman Backwell's wife, by my invitation with my head, come up with her mother and sat with us, and after sermon I did walk with them home, and there left them, and home to dinner, and after dinner with Sir J. Minns and T. Middleton to Whitehall by appointment. And at my Lord Arlington's the office did attend the king and cabal, to discourse the further quantity of victuals fit to be declared for, which was 2,000 men for 6 months. And so, without more ado or stay, there, hearing no news but that Sir Thomas Allen is to be expected every hour at home with his fleet, or news of his being gone back to Algier, and so home, where got my wife to read to me, and so after supper to bed. The Queen Mother hath been of late mighty ill, and some fears of her death. Fifth, up and by coach, it being very cold, to Whitehall, expecting a meeting of Tangier, but it did not. But however, did wait there all the morning, and among other things, I spent a little time with Creed walking in the garden, and talking about our office, and Childs coming in to be a commissioner. And, being his friend, I did think he might do me a kindness to learn of him what the Duke of Buckingham and the faction do design touching me, and to instill good words concerning me, which he says, and I believe he will. And it is but necessary. For I have not a mind indeed at this time to be put out of my office, if I can make any shift that is honorable to keep it, but I will not do it by deserting the Duke of York. At noon, by appointment comes Mr. Shears, and he and I to Unthanks, where my wife stays for us in our coach, and Betty Turner with her. And we to the mulberry garden, where Shears is to treat us with a Spanish olio. An olio is a mixed dish of meat and vegetables, and, secondarily, mixture or medley. By a cook of his acquaintance that is there, that was with my lord in Spain, and without any other company, he did do it, and mighty nobly, and the olio was indeed a very noble dish, such as I never saw better, or any more of. This, and the discourse he did give us of Spain, and description of the Escurial, was a fine treat. So we left other good things, that would keep till night for a collation, and with much content took coach again, and went 5 or 6 miles towards Branford. The Prince of Tuscany, who comes into England only to spend money and see our country, comes into the town today and is much expected. And we met him, but the coach passing by apace, we could not see much of him, but he seems a very jolly and good comely man. By the way, we overtook Captain Furrers upon his fine Spanish horse, and he is a fine horse indeed, but not so good, I think, as I have seen some. He did ride by us most of the way, and with us to the park, and there left us, where we passed the evening, and meeting the Turner, Talbot, W. Batelier, and his sister in a coach, we anon took them with us to the mulberry garden, and there, after a walk, to supper upon what was left at noon, and very good. Only Mr. Shears being taken suddenly ill for a while did spoil our mirth, but by and by was well again, and we mighty merry. And so broke up and left him at Charing Cross, and so calling only at my cousin Turner, away home, mightily pleased with the day's work, and this day come another new maid, for a middle maid, but her name I know not yet. And for a cookmaid we have ever since Bridget went, used a Blackmore of Mr. Batelier, doll, who dresses our meat mighty well, and we mightily pleased with her. So by and by to bed. 6th, up and to the office, and thence to the excise office about some business, and so back to the office and sat till late, and thence to Mr. Batelier's to dinner, where my cousin Turner and both her daughters, and Talbot Pepys and my wife, and a mighty fine dinner. They at dinner before I come, and when I had dined, I away home, and thence to Whitehall, where the board waited on the Duke of York to discourse about the disposing of Sir Thomas Allen's fleet, which is newly come home to Portsmouth. And here Middleton and I did in plain terms acquaint the Duke of York what we thought and had observed in the late court-martial, which the Duke did give ear to. And though he thinks not fit to revoke what is already done in this case by a court-martial, yet it shall bring forth some good laws in the behavior of captains to their under-officers for the time to come. Thence home, and there, after a while at the office, I home, and there come home my wife, who hath been with Batelier's late, and been dancing with the company, at which I seemed a little troubled, not being sent for thither myself. But I was not much so, but went to bed well enough pleased. 7th, up and by coach to my cousin Turner, and invited them to dine at the Cock today, with my wife and me. And so to the Lords of the Treasury, where all the morning and settled matters to their liking about the assignments on the customs, between the Navy Office and Victualler, and to that end spent most of the morning there with D. Gauden, and thence took him to the Cock, and there left him and my clerk Gibson together evening their reckonings, while I to the New Exchange to talk with Betty, my little sempstress. And so to Mrs. Turner to call them to dinner, but my wife not come, I back again, and was overtaken by a porter, with a message from my wife that she was ill and could not come to us. So I back again to Mrs. Turner and find them gone. And so back again to the Cock, and there find Mr. Turner, Betty, and Talbot Pepys, and they dined with myself Sir D. Gauden and Gibson, and mighty merry, this house being famous for good meat, and particularly peas porridge, and after dinner broke up, and they away. And I to the council chamber, and there heard the great complaint of the city, tried against the gentlemen of the Temple, for the late riot as they would have it, when my Lord Mayor was there. But upon hearing the whole business, the city was certainly to blame to charge them in this manner as with a riot. But the king and council did forbear to determine anything it, till the other business of the title and privilege be decided, which is now under dispute at law between them, whether Temple be within the liberty of the city or no. But I, sorry to see the city so ill-advised as to complain in a thing where their proofs were so weak. Thence to my cousin Turner and thence with her and her daughters and her sister Turner, I carrying Betty in my lap, to Talbot's chamber at the Temple, where, by agreement, the poor rogue had a pretty dish of anchovies and sweetmeats for them. And hither come Mr. Eden, who was in his mistress's disfavor ever since the other night that he come in thither fuddled, when we were there. But I did make them friends by my buffoonery, and bringing up a way of spelling their names, and making Theophilus spell Lambton, which would have to be the name of Mr. Eden's mistress, and mighty merry we were till late, and then I by coach home, and so to bed, my wife being ill of those, but well enough pleased with my being with them. This day I do hear that Betty Turner is to be left at school at Hackney, which I am mightily pleased with, for then I shall, now and then, see her. She is pretty and a girl for that, and her relations I love. 8th, up and to Whitehall to the King's side, to find Sir T. Clifford, where the Duke of York come and found me, which I was sorry for fear he should think I was making friends on that side. But I did put it off the best I could, my being there. And so, by and by, had opportunity alone to show Sir T. Clifford the fair account I had drawn up of the customs, which he liked, and seemed mightily pleased with me. And so away to the excise office, to do a little business there, and so to the office, where all the morning. At noon home to dinner, and then to the office again till the evening, and then with my wife by coach to Islington, to pay what we owe there for the late dinner at Jane's wedding. And so round by Kingsland and Hogston home, pleased with my wife singing with me, by the way, and so to the office again a little, and then home to supper and to bed. Going this afternoon through Smithfield, I did see a coach run over the coachman's neck and stand upon it, and yet the man rose up and was well after it, which I thought a wonder. 9th, up and by water to Whitehall, and there, with the board, attended the Duke of York and Sir Thomas Allen with us, who come to town yesterday. And it is resolved another fleet shall go to the Straits forthwith, and he command it. But his coming home is mighty hardly talked on by the merchants, for leaving their ships there to the mercy of the Turks, but of this more in my white book. Thence out and slipped out by water to Westminster Hall, and there thought to have spoke with Mrs. Martin, but she was not there, nor at home. So back again, and with W. Hewer by coach home and to dinner, and then to the office, and out again with W. Hewer to the excise office, and to several places, among others to Mr. Faithorn, S., to have seen an instrument which he was said to have for drawing perspectives, but he had it not. But here I did see his workhouse, and the best things of his doing he had by him, and so to other places, among others to Westminster Hall, and I took occasion to make a step to Mrs. Martin's, the first time I have been with her since her husband went last to sea, which is I think a year since. But, Lord, to hear how sillily she tells the story of her sister Doll's being a widow and lately brought to bed, and her husband, one Rowland Powell, drowned, sea with her husband, but by chance dead at sea, cast when God knows she hath played the whore, and forced at this time after she was brought to bed, this story. Thence calling at several places by the home, and there to the office, and then home to supper and to bed. 10th, up and to the excise office, and thence to Whitehall a little, and so back again to the Change, but nobody there, it being over, and so walked home to dinner. And after dinner comes Mr. Seymour to visit me, a talking fellow. But I hear by him that Captain Trevanion do give it out everywhere that I did overrule the whole court-martial against him, as long as I was there. And perhaps I may receive, this time, some wrong by it. But I care not, for what I did was out of my desire of doing justice. So the office, where late, and then home to supper and to bed. 11th, Lord's Day, Easter Day, up and to church, where Alderman Backwell's wife and mother and boy and another gentlewoman did come and sit in our pew, but no women of our own there, and so there was room enough. Our parson made a dull sermon, and so home to dinner, and after dinner my wife and I out by coach and Balty with us to Lawton, the landscape drawer, a Dutchman, living in St. James's Market, but there saw no good pictures. But by accident he did direct us to a painter that was then in the house with him, a Dutchman, newly come over, one of Verelst, who took us to his lodging close by, and did show us a little flower pot of his doing, the finest thing that ever I think I saw in my life. The drops of dew hanging on the leaves, so as I was forced, again and again, to put my finger to it, to feel whether my eyes were deceived or no. He do ask L70 for it. I had the vanity to bid him L20, but a better picture I never saw in my whole life, and it is worth going 20 miles to see it. Thence, leaving Balty there, I took my wife to St. James's, and there carried her to the Queen's Chapel, the first time I ever did it, and heard excellent music, but not so good as by accident I did hear there yesterday, as I went through the park from Whitehall to see Sir W. Coventry, which I have forgot to set down in my journal yesterday. And going out of the chapel, I did see the Prince of Tuscany come out, a comely, black, fat man in a morning suit, and my wife and I did see him this afternoon through a window in this chapel. All that Sir W. Coventry yesterday did tell me knew was, that the king would not yet give him leave to come to kiss his hand. And he do believe that he will not in a great while do it, till those about him shall see fit, which I am sorry for. Thence to the park my wife and I, and here Sir W. Coventry did first see me and my wife in a coach of our own, and so did also this night the Duke of York, who did eye my wife mightily. But I begin to doubt that my being so much seen in my own coach at this time may be observed to my prejudice, but I must venture it now. So home, and by night home, and so to my office, and there set down my journal, with the help of my left eye through my tube, for 14 days past, which is so much as I hope I shall not run in arrear again, but the badness of my eyes do force me to it. So home to supper and to bed. 12th, up, and by water to Whitehall, where I of the whole office attended the Duke of York at his meeting with Sir Thomas Allen and several flag officers, to consider of the manner of managing the war with Algiers. And, it being a thing I was wholly silent in, I did only observe, and find that their manner of discourse on this weighty affair was very mean and disorderly, the Duke of York himself being the man that I thought spoke most to the purpose. Having done here, I up and down the house, talking with this man and that, and, then meeting Mr. Shears, took him to see the fine flower pot I saw yesterday, and did again offer L20 for it, but he insists upon L50. Thence I took him to St. James's, but there was no musique, but so walked to Whitehall, and by to my wife at Unthanks, and with her was Jane, and so to the Cock, where they and I and Shears and Tom dined, my wife having a great desire to eat of their soup made of peas, and dined very well. And thence by water to the Bear Garden, and there happened to sit by Sir Fretchville Hollies, who is still full of his vainglorious and profane talk. Here we saw a prize fought between a soldier and country fellow, one Worrell, who promised the least in his looks, and performed the most of valor in his boldness and evenness of mind, and smiles in all he did, that ever I saw, and we were all both deceived and infinitely taken with him. He did soundly beat the soldier, and cut him over the head. Thence back to Whitehall, mightily pleased, all of us, with this sight, and particularly this fellow, as a most extraordinary man for his temper and evenness in fighting. And there leaving Shears, we by our own coach home, and after sitting an hour, thrumming upon my viol and singing, I to bed, and left my wife to do something to a waistcoat and petticoat she is to wear tomorrow. This evening, coming home, we overtook Alderman Backwell's coach and his lady, and followed them to their house, and there made them the first visit, where they received us with extraordinary civility and owning the obligation. But I do, contrary to my expectation, find her something a proud and vainglorious woman, in telling the number of her servants and family and expenses. He is also so, but he was ever of that strain. But here he showed me the model of his houses that he is going to build in Cornhill and Lombard Street. But he hath purchased so much there, that it looks like a little town, and must have cost him a great deal of money. 13th. Up and at the office a good while, and then, my wife going down the river to spend the day with her mother at Diptford, I abroad, and first to the milliner's in Fenchurch Street, over against Rawlinson S., and there meeting both him and her in the shop, I bought a pair of gloves and fell to talk, and found so much freedom that I stayed there the best part of the morning till towards noon with great pleasure, it being a holiday, and then against my will away and to the Change, where I left W. Hewer. And I by hackney coach to the Spittal, and heard a piece of a dull sermon to my Lord Mayor and aldermen, and then saw them all take horse and ride away, which I have not seen together many a day. Their wives also went in their coaches, and, indeed, the sight was mighty pleasing. Thence took occasion to go back to this milliner's, whose name I now understand to be Clerk. And there, her husband inviting me up to the balcony, to see the sight go by to dine at Clothworkers' Hall, I did go up and there saw it go by, and then, there being a good piece of cold roast beef upon the tables and one Marget's, a young merchant that lodges there, and is likely to marry a sister of hers, I stayed and eat, and had much good conversation with her, who hath the vanity to talk of her great friends and father, one Wingate, near Welling, that hath been a Parliament man. Here also was Stapley, the rope merchant, and dined with us, and after spending most of the afternoon also, I away home, and there sent for W. Hewer, and he and I by water to Whitehall to loop among other things, for Mr. May to unbespeak his dining with me tomorrow. But here being in the courtyard, God would have it, I spied Deb. Which made my heart and head to work, and I presently could not refrain, but sent W. Hewer away to look for Mr. Wren. W. Hewer, I perceive, did see her. But whether he did see me see her I know not, or suspect my sending him away I know not. But my heart could not hinder me, and I run after her and two women and a man, more ordinary people, and she in her old clothes, and after hunting a little, find them in the lobby of the chapel below stairs. And there I observed she endeavored to avoid me, but I did speak to her and she to me, and did get her poor dire me she de moors now, and did charge her para say nothing of me that I had vu elle, which she did promise. And so with my heart full of surprise and disorder I away, and meeting with Sir H. calmly walked into the park with him and back again, looking to see if I could spy her again in the park, but I could not. And so back to Whitehall, and then back to the park with Mr. May, but could see her no more, and so with W. Hewer, who I doubt by my countenance might see some disorder in me. We home by water, and there I find Talbot Pepys, and Mrs. Turner and Betty come to invite us to dinner on Thursday. And after drinking, I saw them to the waterside, and so back home through Crutched Friars, and there saw Mary Mercer, and put off my hat to her on the other side of the way. But it being a little darkish, she did not, I think, know me well, and so to my office to put my papers in order, they having been removed from my closet to be made clean, and so home to my wife, who is come home from Deptford. But God forgive me, I hardly know how to put on confidence enough to speak as innocent, having had this passage today with Deb, though only, God knows, by accident. But my great pain is lest God Almighty shall suffer me to find out this girl, whom indeed I love, and with a bad amour, but I will pray to God to give me grace to forbear it. So home to supper, where very sparing in my discourse, not giving occasion of any inquiry where I have been today, or what I have done, and so without any trouble tonight more than my fear, we to bed. 14th. Up and with W. Hewer to Whitehall, and there I did speak with the Duke of York, the council sitting in the morning, and it was to direct me to have my business ready of the administration of the office against Saturday next, when the king would have a hearing of it. Thence home, W. Hewer with me, and then out with my own coach to the Duke of York's playhouse, and there saw The Impertinence, a play which pleases me well still. But it is with great trouble that I now see a play, because of my eyes, the light of the candles making it very troublesome to me. After the play, my wife and I towards the park, but it being too late we to creed S, and there find him and her together alone in their new house, where I never was before, they lodging before at the next door, and a pretty house it is. But I do not see that they intend to keep any coach. Here they treat us like strangers, quite according to the fashion, nothing to drink or eat, which is a thing that will spoil our ever having any acquaintance with them. For we do continue the old freedom and kindness of England to all our friends. But they do here talk mightily of my Lady Paulina making a very good end, and being mighty religious in her lifetime, and hath left many good notes of sermons and religion, wrote with her own hand which nobody ever knew of, which I am glad of, but she was always a peevish lady. Thence home, and there to talk and to supper and to bed, all being very safe as to my seeing of poor Deb. Yesterday. 15th. Up, and to the office, and thence before the office sat to the excise office with W. Hewer, but found some occasion to go another way to the Temple upon business, and I by Deb's direction did know whither in Jewin Street to direct my hackney coachman, while I stayed in the coach in Aldgate Street, to go thither just to inquire whether Mrs. Hunt, her aunt, was in town, who brought me word she was not. Thought this was as much as I could do at once, and therefore went away troubled through that I could do no more, but to the office I must go and did, and there all the morning. But coming thither I find Bagwell's wife, who did give me a little note into my hand, wherein I find her para invite me para meet her in Moorfields this noon, where I might speak with her. And so after the office was up, my wife being gone before by invitation to my cousin Turner's to dine, I to the place, and there. After walking up and down by the windmills, I did find her and talk with her, but it being holiday and the place full of people, we parted, leaving further discourse and doing to another time. Thence I away, and through Jewin Street my mind, God knows, running that way, but stopped not, but going down Holborn Hill by the conduit, I did see Deb. On foot going up the hill. I saw her and she me, but she made no stop, but seemed unwilling to speak to me. So I away on, but then stopped and light, and after her and overtook her at the end of Hosier Lane in Smithfield, and without standing in the street desired her to follow me, and I led her into a little blind alehouse within the walls, and there she and I alone fell to talk and baser law and toker Sue mammals, but she mighty coy, and I hope modest. I did give her in a paper 20s. And we did agree para meet again in the hall at Westminster on Monday next, and so giving me great hopes by her carriage that she continues modest and honest, we did there part, she going home and I to Mrs. Turner's. But when I come back to the place where I left my coach it was gone, I having stayed too long, which did trouble me to abuse the poor fellow, so that taking another coach I did direct him to find out the fellow and send him to me. At my cousin Turner's I find they are gone all to dinner to Povy's, and thither I, and there they were all, and W. Batelier and his sister, and had dined. But I had good things brought me, and then all up and down the house and mightily pleased to see the fine rooms. But the truth is, there are so many bad pictures that to me make the good ones lose much of the pleasure in seeing them. And Betty Turner in new flowered tabby gowns, and so we were pretty merry, only my fear upon me for what I had newly done, do keep my content in. So, about 5 or 6 o'clock away, and I took my wife and the 2 Bateliers and carried them homeward, and W. Batelier, lighting, I carried the women round by Islington, and so down Bishopsgate Street home, and there to talk and sup, and then to bed. 16th. Up and to my chamber, where with Mr. Gibson all the morning, and there by noon did almost finish what I had to write about the administration of the office to present to the Duke of York, and my wife being gone abroad with W. Hewer to see the new play today at the Duke of York's house. Guzman, I dined alone with my people, and in the afternoon away by coach to Whitehall, and there the office attended the Duke of York. And being dispatched pretty soon, and told that we should not wait on the king, as intended, till Sunday, I thence presently to the Duke of York's playhouse, and there, in the 18d seat, did get room to see almost 3 acts of the play, but it seemed to me but very ordinary. After the play done, I into the pit, and there find my wife and W. Hewer. And shears got to them, which, so jealous is my nature, did trouble me, though my judgment tells me there is no hurt in it, on neither side. But here I did meet with Shadwell, the poet, who, to my great wonder, do tell me that my lord of did write this play, trying what he could do in comedy, since his heroic plays could do no more wonders. This do trouble me, for it is as mean a thing, and so he says, as hath been upon the stage a great while. And Harris, who hath no part in it, did come to me, and told me in discourse that he was glad of it, it being a play that will not take. Thence home, and to my business at the office, to finish it, but was in great pain about yesterday still, lest my wife should have sent her porter to inquire anything, though for my heart I cannot see it possible how anything could be discovered of it, but yet such is fear as to render me full of doubt and disgust. At night to supper, and to bed. 17th. Up and to the office where all the morning. At noon at home to dinner, and there find Mr. Pierce, the surgeon, and he dined with us, and there hearing that The Alchemist was acted, we did go and took him with us to the king's house, and it is still a good play, having not been acted for 2 or 3 years before, but I do miss Clun for the doctor. But more my eyes will not let me enjoy the pleasure I used to have in a play. Thence with my wife in Hackney to Sir W. Coventry's, who being gone to the park we drove after him, and there met him coming out, and followed him home, and there sent my wife to unthanks, while I spent an hour with him reading over first my draft of the administration of the navy, which he do like very well. And so fell to talk of other things, and among the rest of the story of his late disgrace, and how basely, and in what a mean manner, the Duke of Buckingham hath proceeded against him not like a man of honor. He tells me that the king will not give other answer about his coming to kiss his hands, than not yet. But he says that this that he desires, of kissing the king's hand, is only to show to the world that he is not discontented, and not in any desire to come again into play, though I do perceive that he speaks this with less earnestness than heretofore. And this, it may be, is, from what he told me lately, that the king is offended at what is talked, that he hath declared himself desirous not to have to do with any employment more. But he do tell me that the leisure he hath yet had do not at all begin to be burdensome to him, he knowing how to spend his time with content to himself, and that he hopes shortly to contract his expense, so as that he shall not be under any straits in that respect neither, and so seems to be in very good condition of content. Thence I away over the park, it being now night, to Whitehall, and there in the Duchess's chamber do find the Duke of York. And upon my offer to speak with him, he did come to me and withdrew to his closet, and there did hear and approve my paper of the administration of the navy, only did bid me alter these words. Upon the rupture between the late king and the parliament, to these, the beginning of the late rebellion. Giving it me as but reason to show that it was with the rebellion that the navy was put by out of its old good course, into that of a commission. Having done this, we fell to other talk, he with great confidence telling me how matters go among our adversaries in reference to the navy, and that he thinks they do begin to flag. But then, beginning to talk in general of the excellency of old constitutions, he did bring out of his cabinet, and made me read it, an extract out of a book of my late Lord of Northumberland, so prophetic of the business of Chatham, as is almost miraculous. I did desire, and he did give it me to copy out, which pleased me mightily, and so, it being late, I away and to my wife and by hackney, home and there my eyes being weary with reading so much. But yet not so much as I was afeard they would, we home to supper and to bed. 18th Lord's Day. Up and all the morning till 2 o'clock at my office, with Gibson and Tom, about drawing up fair my discourse of the administration of the Navy. And then, Mr. Spung being come to dine with me, I in to dinner, and then out to my office again, to examine the fair draft. And so borrowing Sir J. Minns's coach, he going with Colonel Middleton, I to Whitehall, where we all met and did sign it, and then to my Lord Arlington's, where the King and the Duke of York and Prince Rupert, as also Ormond and the 2 secretaries, with my Lord Ashley and Sir T. Clifton was. And there, by and by, being called in, Mr. Williamson did read over our paper, which was in a letter to the Duke of York, bound up in a book with the Duke of York's book of instructions. He read it well, and after read we were bid to withdraw, nothing being at all said to it. And by we were called in again, and nothing said to that business, but another begun about the state of this year's action and our wants of money, as I had stated the same lately to our treasurers, which I was bid and did largely and with great content open. And having so done, we all withdrew, and left them to debate our supply of money, to which, being called in and referred to attend on the Lords of the Treasury, we all departed. And I only stayed in the house till the council rose, and then to the Duke of York, who in the Duchess's chamber come to me, and told me that the book was there left with my Lord Arlington, for any of the lords to view that had a mind, and to prepare and present to the king what they had to say in writing to any part of it, which is all we can desire, and so that rested. The Duke of York then went to other talk, and by comes the Prince of Tuscany to visit him, and the Duchess, and I find that he do still remain incognito, and so intends to do all the time he stays here, for avoiding trouble to the king and himself, and expense also to both. Thence I to Whitehall gate, thinking to have found Sir J. Minns's coach staying for me. But not being there, and this being the first day of rain we have had many a day, the streets being as dusty as in summer, I forced to walk to my cousin Turner S., and there find my wife newly gone home, which vexed me, and so I, having kissed and taken leave of Betty, who goes to Putney to school tomorrow, I walked through the rain to the Temple, and there, with much ado, got a coach, and so home, and there to supper, and Pelling comes to us, and after much talk, we parted and to bed. 19th. Up and with Tom, whom, with his wife, I and my wife, had this morning taken occasion to tell that I did intend to give him L40 for himself, and L20 to his wife, towards their setting out in the world, and that my wife would give her L20 more, that she might have as much to begin with as he by coach to Whitehall, and their having set him work in the robe chamber, to write something for me, I to Westminster Hall, and there walked from 10 o'clock to past 12, expecting to have met Deb. Whether she had been there before, and missing me went away, or is prevented in coming, and hath no mind to come to me the last whereof, as being most pleasing, as showing most modesty, I should be most glad of, I know not, but she not then appearing, I being tired with walking went home, and my wife being all day at Jane S., helping her, as she said, to cut out linen and other things belonging to her new condition, I after dinner out again, and calling for my coach, which was at the coachmaker S., and hath been for these 2 or 3 days, to be new painted, and the window frames gilt against May Day, went on with my hackney to Whitehall, and thence by water to Westminster Hall, and there did beckon to Doll Lane, now Mrs. Powell, as she would have herself called, and went to her sister Martin's lodgings. The first time I have been there these 8 or 10 months, I think, and her sister being gone to Portsmouth to her husband, I did stay and talk and drink with Doll. So away, and to Whitehall, and there took my own coach, which was now come, and so away home, and there to do business, and my wife being come home we to talk and to sup, there having been nothing yet like discovery in my wife of what hath lately passed with me about Deb. And so with great content to bed. 20th, up, and to the office, and my wife abroad with Mary Baitlier with our own coach, but borrowed Sir J. Minns's coachman, that so our own might stay at home, to attend at dinner. Our family being mightily disordered by our little boys falling sick the last night, and we fear it will prove the smallpox. At noon comes my guest, Mr. Hugh May, and with him Sir Henry Capel, my old Lord Capel's son, and Mr. Parker. and I had a pretty dinner for them, and both before and after dinner had excellent discourse, and showed them my closet and my office and the method of it to their great content. And more extraordinary, manly discourse and opportunity of showing myself, and learning from others, I have not in ordinary discourse had in my life, they being all persons of worth, but especially Sir H. Capel, whose being a Parliament man, and hearing my discourse in the Parliament House, hath, as May tells me, given him a long desire to know and discourse with me. In the afternoon we walked to the old artillery ground near the Spitalfields, where I never was before, but now, by Captain Dean's invitation, did go to see his new gun tried, this being the place where the officers of the ordnance do try all their great guns. And when we come, did find that the trial had been made, and they going away with extraordinary report of the proof of his gun, which, from the shortness and bigness, they do call Punchinello. But I desired Colonel Legge to stay and give us a sight of her performance, which he did, and there, in short, against a gun more than as long and as heavy again, and charged with as much powder again, she carried the same bullet as strong to the mark, and nearer and above the mark at a point blank than theirs, and is more easily managed, and recoils no more than that, which is a thing so extraordinary as to be admired for the happiness of his invention, and to the great regret of the old gunners and officers of the ordnance that were there. Only Colonel Legge did do her much right in his report of her. And so, having seen this great and first experiment, we all parted, I seeing my guests into a hackney coach, and myself, with Captain Dean, taking a hackney coach, did go out towards Bow and went as far as Stratford, and all the way talking of this invention, and he offering me a third of the profit of the invention, which, for aught I know or do at present think, may prove matter considerable to us. For either the king will give him a reward for it, if he keeps it to himself, or he will give us a patent to make our profit of it. And no doubt but it will be of profit to merchantmen and others, to have guns of the same force at half the charge. This was our talk, and then to talk of other things, of the navy in general. And, among other things, he did tell me that he do hear how the Duke of Buckingham hath a spite at me, which I knew before, but value it not. And he tells me that Sir T. Allen is not my friend. But for all this I am not much troubled, for I know myself so useful that, as I believe, they will not part with me, so I thank God my condition is such that I can retire and be able to live with comfort, though not with abundance. Thus we spent the evening with extraordinary good discourse, to my great content, and so home to the office, and there did some business, and then home, where my wife do come home, and I vexed at her staying out so late, but she tells me that she hath been at home with M. Batelier a good while, so I made nothing of it but to supper and to bed. 21st. Up, and with my own coach as far as the Temple, and thence sent it to my cousin Turner, who, to ease her own horses that are going with her out of town, do borrow mine today. So I to Auditor Wood, S., and there to meet, and met my Lord Bellasis upon some business of his accounts, and having done that did thence go to St. James, S., and attended the Duke of York a little, being the first time of my waiting on him at St. James's this summer, whither he is now newly gone, and thence walked to Whitehall. And so, by and by, to the council chamber, and heard a remarkable cause pleaded between the farmers of the excise of Wiltshire, in complaint against the justices of peace of Salisbury, and Sir H. Finch was for the former. But, Lord, to see how he did with his admirable eloquence order the matter, is not to be conceived almost. So pleasant a thing it is to hear him plead. Then at noon by coach home, and thither by and by comes cousin Turner, and Joyce in their riding clod, they being come from their lodgings to her husband's chamber, at the Temple, and there do lie, and purpose to go out of town on Friday next, and here I had a good dinner for them. After dinner by water to Whitehall, where the Duke of York did meet our office, and went with us to the Lords Commissioners of the Treasury. And there we did go over all the business of the state I had drawn up, of this year's action and expense, which I did due to their satisfaction, and convincing them of the necessity of providing more money, if possible, for us. Thence the Duke of York being gone, I did there stay walking with Sir H. Comely in the court, talking of news, where he told me that now the great design of the Duke of Buckingham is to prevent the meeting, since he cannot bring about with the king the dissolving of this parliament, that the king may not need it. And therefore my Lord St. Albans is hourly expected with great offers of 1 million of money from Louis Roman XIV. See April 28th do buy our breach with the Dutch. And this, they do think, may tempt the king to take the money, and thereby be out of a necessity of calling the Parliament again, which these people dare not suffer to meet again. But this he doubts, and so do I, that it will be to the ruin of the nation if we fall out with Holland. This we were discoursing when my boy comes to tell me that his mistress was at the gate with the coach, whither I went, and there find my wife and the whole company. So she and Mrs. Turner and Talbot in mine, and Joyce W. Baitlier and I in a hackney to Hyde Park, where I was ashamed to be seen. But mightily pleased, though troubled, with a drunken coachman that did not remember when we come to Light, where it was that he took us up, but said at Hammersmith, and thither he was carrying of us when we come first out of the park. So I carried them all to Hercules Pillars, and there did treat them. And so, about 10 at night, parted, and my wife and I and W. Baitlier home, and he gone, we to bed. 22nd. Up and to the office where all the morning. At noon home to dinner, and Captain Dean with us, and very good discourse, and particularly about my getting a book for him to draw up his whole theory of shipping, which at my desire he hath gone far in, and hath shewn me what he hath done therein to admiration. I did give him a parallelogram, which he is mightily taken with, and so after dinner to the office, where all the afternoon till night late, and then home. Vexed at my wife's not being come home, she being gone again abroad with M. Baitlier, and come not home till 10 at night, which vexed me, so that I to bed and lay in pain awake till past 1, and then to sleep. 23rd. Going to rise, without saying anything, my wife stopped me, and after a little angry talk, did tell me how she spent all day yesterday with M. Baitlier and her sweetheart, and seeing a play at the new nursery, which is set up at the house in Lincoln's Inn Fields, which was formerly the king's house. So that I was mightily pleased again, and rose with great content, and so by water to Whitehall, and there to the council chamber, and heard 2 or 3 causes. Among others, that of the complaint of Sir Philip Howard and Watson, the inventors, as they pretend, of the business of varnishing and lacquer work, against the company of painters, who take upon them to do the same thing. Where I saw a great instance of the weakness of a young counsel not used to such an audience, against the Solicitor General and 2 more able counsel used to it. Though he had the right of his side, and did prevail for what he pretended to against the rest, yet it was with much disadvantage and hazard. Here also I heard Mr. Papillion make his defense to the king against some complaints of the farmers of excise, but it was so weak, and done only by his own seeking, that it was to his injury more than profit, and made his case the worse, being ill managed and in a cause against the king. Thence at noon, the council rising, I to unthank S, and there by agreement met my wife, and with her to the cock, and did give her a dinner, but yet both of us but in an ill humor whatever was the matter with her, but thence to the king's playhouse, and saw The Generous Portugals, a play that pleases me better and better every time we see it, and, I thank God, it did not trouble my eyes so much as I was afeard it would. Here, by accident, we met Mr. Shears, and yet I could not but be troubled, because my wife do so delight to talk of him, and to see him. Nevertheless, we took him with us to our mercer S, and to the Exchange, and he helped me to choose a summer suit of colored camelot, coat and breeches, and a flowered tabby vest very rich. And so home, where he took his leave, and down to Greenwich, where he hath some friends, and I to see Colonel Middleton, who hath been ill for a day or 2 or 3, and so home to supper and to bed. 24th. Up and to the office, where all the morning, and at noon home to dinner, Mr. Shears dining with us by agreement, and my wife, which troubled me, mighty careful to have a handsome dinner for him. But yet I see no reason to be troubled at it, he being a very civil and worthy man, I think. But only it do seem to imply some little neglect of me. After dinner to the king's house, and there saw the general revived a good play, that pleases me well, and thence our coach coming for us, we parted and home, and I busy late at the office, and then home to supper and to bed. Well pleased tonight to have Lead the vizard maker bring me home my vizard, with a tube fastened in it, which, I think, will do my business, at least in a great measure, for the easing of my eyes. 25th, Lord's Day. Up, and to my office a while, and thither comes Lead with my vizard, with a tube fastened within both eyes, which, with the help which he prompts me to, of a glass in the tube, do content me mightily. So to church, where a stranger made a dull sermon, but I mightily pleased to looks upon Mr. Buckworth's little pretty daughters, and so home to dinner, where W. Howe come and dined with us. And then I to my office, he being gone, to write down my journal for the last 12 days. And did it with the help of my vizard and tube fixed to it, and do find it mighty manageable, but how helpful to my eyes this trial will show me. So abroad with my wife in the afternoon to the park, where very much company, and the weather very pleasant. I carried my wife to the lodge, the first time this year, and there in our coach eat a cheesecake and drank a tankard of milk. I showed her this day also first the Prince of Tuscany, who was in the park, and many very fine ladies, and so home, and after supper to bed. 26th. Up, having lain long, and then by coach with W. Hewer to the excise office, and so to Lilly's, the varnishes, who is lately dead, and his wife and brother keep up the trade, and their eye left my French prince to be put on boards. And, while I was there, a fire burst out in a chimney of a house over against his house, but it was with a gun quickly put out. So to Whitehall, and did a little business there at the Treasury Chamber, and so homeward, calling at the laceman's for some lace for my new suit, and at my tailor S., and so home, where to dinner. And Mr. Shears dined with us, who come hither today to teach my wife the rules of perspective. But I think, upon trial, he thinks it too hard to teach her, being ignorant of the principles of lines. After dinner comes one Colonel Macnachin, one that I see often at court, a Scotchman, but know him not. Only he brings me a letter from my Lord Middleton, who, he says, is in great distress for L500 to relieve my Lord Morton with, but upon what account I know not. And he would have me advance it without order upon his pay for tenure, which I was astonished at, but had the grace to deny him with an excuse. And so he went away, leaving me a little troubled that I was thus driven on a sudden to do anything herein. But Creed, coming just now to see me, he approves of what I have done. And then to talk of general matters, and by, Shears being gone, my wife and he and I out, and I set him down at Temple Bar, and myself and wife went down the Temple upon seeming business, only to put him off, and just at the Temple gate I spied Deb, with another gentlewoman, and Deb winked on me and smiled, but undiscovered, and I was glad to see her. So my wife and I to the change about things for her. And here, at Mrs. Burnet's shop, I am told by Betty, who is all undressed, of a great fire happened in Durham Yard last night, burning the house of one Lady Hungerford, who was to come to town to it this night. And so the house is burned, new furnished, by carelessness of the girl sent to take off a candle from a bunch of candles, which she did by burning it off, and left the rest, as is supposed, on fire. The king and court were here, it seems, and stopped the fire by blowing up of the next house. The king and court went out of town to Newmarket this morning betimes, for a week. So home, and there to my chamber, and got my wife to read to me a little, and so to supper and to bed. Coming home this night, I did call at the coachmaker, S., and do resolve upon having the standards of my coach gilt with this new sort of varnish, which will come but to 40s. And, contrary to my expectation, the doing of the biggest coach all over comes not to above L6, which is very much. 27th. Up and to the office, where all the morning. At noon home to dinner, and then to the office again, where the afternoon busy till late, and then home, and got my wife to read to me in the Nepotisme. The work here mentioned is a bitter satire against the court Rome, written in Italian, and attributed to Gregorio Leti. It was first printed in 1667, without the name or place of printer, but it is from the press of the Elzevirs. The book obtained by Pepys was probably the anonymous English translation, Il Nepotismo di Roma, or the history of the Pope's nephews from the time of Sixtus the Roman IV, to the death the last Pope Alexander the Roman VII, in 2 parts. Written originally Italian in the year 1667 and Englished by W. A. London, 8 vo. From this work the word nepotism is derived, and is applied to the bad practice of statesmen, when in power, providing lucrative places for their relations. Which is very pleasant, and so to supper and to bed. This afternoon was brought to me a fresh distringas upon the score of the Tangier accounts, which vexes me, though I hope it will not turn to my wrong. 28th. Up and was called upon by Sir H. Comely to discourse about some accounts of his, of Tangier, and then other talk, and I find by him that it has brought almost effect, the late endeavours of the Duke of York Duchess, the Queen Mother, and my Lord St. Albans, together with some of the contrary faction, my Lord Arlington, that for a sum of money we shall enter into a league with the King of France, wherein, he says, my Lord Chancellor is also concerned. and that he believes that, in the doing hereof, it is meant that he shall come again, and that this sum of money will so help the king that he will not need the Parliament, and that, in that regard, it will be forwarded by the Duke of Buckingham and his faction, who dread the Parliament. But hereby we must leave the Dutch, and that I doubt will undo us. And Sir H. Comely says he finds W. Coventry do think the like. Lady Castlemaine is instrumental in this matter, and he say never more great with the king than she is now. But this a thing that will make the Parliament and kingdom mad, and will turn to our ruin. For with this money the king shall wanton away his time and pleasures, and think nothing of the main till it be too late. He gone, I to the office, where busy till noon, and then home to dinner, where W. Baitlier dined with us, and pretty merry, and so I to the office again. This morning Mr. Shears sent me, in 2 volumes, Mariana his History of Spain, in Spanish, an excellent book, and I am much obliged for it to him. 29th. Up, and to the office, where all the morning and at noon dined at home, and then to the office again, there to dispatch as much business as I could, that I might be at liberty tomorrow to look after my many things that I have to do, against May Day. So at night home to supper and to bed. 30th. Up, and by coach to the coachmaker S. And there I do find a great many ladies sitting in the body of a coach that must be ended by tomorrow. They were my Lady Marquess of Winchester, Bellasis, and other great ladies, eating of bread and butter and drinking ale. I to my coach, which is silvered over, but no varnish yet laid on, so I put it in a way of doing, and myself about other business, and particularly to see Sir W. Coventry, with whom I talked a good while to my great content, and so to other places among others, to my tailor S., and then to the belt maker's, where my belt cost me 55s. Of the color of my new suit, and here, understanding that the mistress of the house, an oldish woman in a hat, hath some water good for the eyes, she did dress me, making my eyes smart most horribly, and did give me a little glass of it, which I will use, and hope it will do me good. So to the cutler S., and there did give Tom, who was with me all day, a sword cost me 12s, and a belt of my own, and set my own silver-hilt sword a gilding against tomorrow. This morning I did visit Mr. Oldenburg, and did see the instrument for perspective made by Dr. Wren, of which I have one making by Brown, and the sight of this do please me mightily. At noon my wife come to me at my tailor S., and I sent her home, and myself and Tom dined at Hercules Pillars, and so about our business again, and particularly to Lily's, the varnisher, about my prints, whereof some of them are pasted upon the boards, and to my full content. Thence to the frame makers, one Morris in Long Acre, who showed me several forms of frames to choose by, which was pretty, in little bits of mouldings to choose by. This done, I to my coachmaker S., and they're vexed to see nothing yet done to my coach at 3 in the afternoon. But I set it in doing, and stood by it till 8 at night, and saw the painter varnish, which is pretty to see how every doing it over do make it more and more yellow. And it dries as fast in the sun as it can be laid on almost. And most coaches are, nowadays, done so, and it is very pretty when laid on well, and not pale, as some are, even to show the silver. Here I did make the workmen drink, and saw my coach cleaned and oiled, and, staying among poor people there in the alley, did hear them call their fat child punch, which pleased me mightily, that word being become a word of common use for all that is thick and short. At night home, and there find my wife hath been making herself clean against tomorrow, and, late as it was, I did send my coachman and horses to fetch home the coach tonight. And so we to supper, myself most weary with walking and standing so much, to see all things fine against tomorrow, and so to bed. God give a blessing to it. Meeting with Mr. Shears, he went with me up and down to several places, and, among others, to buy a periwig, but I bought none, and also to Danker's, where he was about my picture of Windsor, which is mighty pretty, and so will the prospect of Rome be. May 1669. May 1st. Up betimes. Called up by my tailor, and their first put on a summer suit this year, but it was not my fine one of flowered tabby vest and colored camelot tunique, because it was too fine with the gold lace at the hands that I was afeard to be seen in it, but put on the stuff suit I made the last year, which is now repaired, and so did go to the office in it, and sat all the morning, the day looking as if it would be foul. At noon home to dinner, and there find my wife extraordinary fine, with her flowered tabby gown that she made 2 years ago, now laced exceeding pretty, and indeed was fine all over, and mighty earnest to go, though the day was very lowering. And she would have me put on my fine suit, which I did. And so anon we went alone through the town with our new liveries of serge, and the horses, manes and tails tied with red ribbons, and the standards there gilt with varnish, and all clean and green refines, that people did mightily look upon us. And the truth is, I did not see any coach more pretty, though more gay, than ours all the day. But we set out of humour because Betty, whom I expected, was not come to go with us, and my wife that I would sit on the same seat with her, which she likes not, being so fine. And she then expected to meet Shears, which we did in the pell-mell, and against my will I was forced to take him into the coach, but was sullen all day almost, and little complacent. The day also being unpleasing, though the park full of coaches, but dusty and windy and cold, and now and then a little dribbling rain. And what made it worst, there were so many hackney coaches as spoiled the sight of the gentlemen's, and so we had little pleasure. But here was W. Batelier and his sister in a borrowed coach by themselves, and I took them and we to the lodge, and at the door did give them a syllabub, and other things, cost me 12s, and pretty merry. And so back to the coaches, and there till the evening, and then home, leaving Mr. Shears at St. James's Gate, where he took leave of us for altogether, he being this night to set out for Portsmouth Post, in his way to Tangier, which troubled my wife mightily, who is mighty though not, I think, too fond of him. But she was out of humour all the evening, and I vexed at her for it, and she did not rest almost all the night, so as in the night I was forced to take her and hug her to put her to rest. So home, and after a little supper to bed. 2nd Lord's Day. Up, and by water to Whitehall, and there visit my Lord Sandwich, who, after about 2 months' absence at Hinchingbroke, come to town last night. I saw him, and very kind, and I am glad he is so, I having not wrote to him all the time, my eyes indeed not letting me. Here with Sir Charles Herbert, and my Lord Hinchingbroke, and Sidney, we looked upon the picture of Tangier, designed by Charles Herbert and drawn by Danker, which my Lord Sandwich admires, as being the truest picture that ever he saw in his life. And it is indeed very pretty, and I will be at the cost of having one of them. Thence with them to Whitehall, and there walked out the sermon with one or other. And then saw the Duke of York after sermon, and he talked to me a little, and so away back by water home, and after dinner got my wife to read, and then by coach, she and I to the park, and there spent the evening with much pleasure, it proving clear after a little shower. And we mighty fine as yesterday, and people mightily pleased with our coach, as I perceived. But I had not on my fine suit, being really afeard to wear it being so fine with the gold lace, though not gay. So home and to supper, and my wife to read, and Tom, my nepotisme, and then to bed. 3rd, up and by coach to my Lord Brounker's, where Sir G. Carteret did meet Sir J. Minns and me, to discourse upon Mr. Deering's business, who was directed, in the time of the war, to provide provisions at Hamburg, by Sir G. Carteret's direction. And now G. Carteret is afeard to own it being done without written order. But by our meeting, we do all begin to recollect enough to preserve Mr. Deering, I think, which, poor silly man, I shall be glad of, it being too much he should suffer for endeavouring to serve us. Thence to St. James's, where the Duke of York was playing in the pell-mell, and so he called me to him most part of the time that he played, which was an hour, and talked alone to me, and among other things, tells me how the king will not yet be got to name anybody in the room of Penn, but puts it off for 3 or 4 days. From whence he do collect that they are brewing something for the navy, but what he knows not. But I perceive is vexed that things should go so, and he hath reason. For he told me that it is likely they will do in this as in other things resolve first, and consider it, and the fitness of it afterward. Thence to Whitehall, and met with Creed, and I took him to the Harp and balls, and there drank a cup of ale, he and I alone, and discoursed of matters. And I perceive by him that he makes no doubt but that all will turn to the old religion, for these people cannot hold things in their hands, nor prevent its coming to that. And by his discourse fits himself for it, and would have my Lord Sandwich do so too, and me. After a little talk with him, and particularly about the ruinous condition of Tangier, which I have a great mind to lay before the Duke of York, before it be too late, but dare not, because of his great kindness to Lord Middleton, we parted and I homeward. But called at Povy's, and there he stopped me to dinner, there being Mr. Williamson, the lieutenant of the Tower, Mr. Child, and several others. And after dinner, Povy and I together to talk of Tangier, and he would have me move the Duke of York in it, for it concerns him particularly, more than any, as being the head of us, and I do think to do it. Thence home, and at the office busy all the afternoon, and so to supper and to bed. Fourth, up and to the office, and then my wife being gone to see her mother at Deptford, I before the office went to the excise office, and thence being alone stepped into Duck Lane, and thence tried to have sent a porter to Deb. S, but durst not trust him, and therefore having bought a book to satisfy the bookseller for my stay there, a 12d. Book Andronicus of Tom Fuller, I took coach, and at the end of Jewin Street next Red Cross Street, I sent the coachman to her lodging, and understand she is gone for Greenwich to one Marys's, a tanner S, at which I was glad, hoping to have opportunity to find her out. And so, in great fear of being seen, I to the office, and there all the morning dined at home, and presently after dinner comes home my wife, who I believe is jealous of my spending the day, and I had very good fortune in being at home, for if Deb had been to have been found it is 40-1, but I had been abroad, God forgive me. So the afternoon at the office, and at night walked with my wife in the garden, and my Lord Brounker with us, who is newly come to W. Penn's lodgings. And by comes Mr. Hook, and my lord and he and I into my lord's lodgings, and there discoursed of many fine things in philosophy, to my great content, and so home to supper and to bed. Fifth, up, and thought to have gone with Lord Brounker to Mr. Hook this morning betimes, but my lord is taken ill of the gout, and says his new lodgings have infected him, he never having had any symptoms of it till now. So walked to Gresham College, to tell Hook that my lord could not come, and so left word, he being abroad, and I to St. James, S., and thence with the Duke of York to Whitehall, where the board waited on him all the morning. And so at noon with Sir Thomas Allen and Sir Edward Scott and Lord Carlingford to the Spanish ambassadors, where I dined the first time. The olio not so good as Shears, S. There was at the table himself and a Spanish countess, a good, comely, and witty lady, 3 fathers and us. Discourse good and pleasant. And here was an Oxford scholar in a doctor of law's gown, sent from the college where the ambassador lay, when the court was there, to salute him before his return to Spain. This man, though a gentle sort of scholar, yet sat like a fool for want of French or Spanish, but only Latin, which he spoke like an Englishman to one of the fathers. And by he and I to talk, and the company very merry at my defending Cambridge against Oxford, and I made much use of my French and Spanish here, to my great content. But the dinner not extraordinary at all, either for quantity or quality. Thence home, where my wife ill of those upon the maid's bed, and troubled at my being abroad. So I to the office, and there till night, and then to her, and she read to me the Epistle of Cassandra, which is very good indeed, and the better to her because recommended by Shears. So to supper, and to bed. Sixth, up and by coach to Sir W. Coventry S., but he gone out. I by water back to the office, and there all the morning, then to dinner, and then to the office again, and anon with my wife by coach to take the air, it being a noble day as far as the Green Man, mightily pleased with our journey and our condition of doing it in our own coach, and so home, and to walk in the garden, and so to supper and to bed, my eyes being bad with writing my journal, part of it, tonight. Seventh, up and by coach to W. Coventry S., and there to talk with him a great deal with great content, and so to the Duke of York, having a great mind to speak to him about Tangier. But, when I come to it, his interest for my Lord Middleton is such that I dare not. So to the Treasury Chamber, and then walked home round by the Excise Office, having by private vows last night in prayer to God Almighty cleared my mind for the present of the thoughts of going to Deb. At Greenwich, which I did long after. I passed by Guildhall, which is almost finished, and saw a poor labourer carried by, I think, dead with a fall, as many there are, I hear. So home to dinner, and then to the office a little, and so to see my Lord Brounker, who is a little ill of the gout, and there Madam Williams told me that she heard that my wife was going into France this year, which I did not deny, if I can get time, and I pray God I may. But I, wondering how she come to know it, she tells me a woman that my wife spoke to for a maid, did tell her so, and that a lady that desires to go thither would be glad to go in her company. Thence with my wife abroad, with our coach, most pleasant weather, and to Hackney, and into the marshes, where I never was before, and thence round about to Old Ford and Bow. And coming through the latter home, there being some young gentlewomen at a door, and I seeming not to know who they were, my wife's jealousy told me presently that I knew well enough it was that damned place where Deb dwelt, which made me swear very angrily that it was false, as it was, and I carried back again to see the place. And it proved not so, so I continued out of humor a good while at it, she being willing to be friends, so I was by and by, saying no more of it. So home, and there met with a letter from Captain Silas Taylor, and with it his written copy of a play that he hath wrote, and intends to have acted it is called The Serenade or Disappointment, which I will read, not believing he can make any good of that kind. He did once offer to show Harris it, but Harris told him that he would judge by one act whether it were good or no, which is indeed a foolish saying, and we see them out themselves in the choice of a play after they have read the whole, it being sometimes found not fit to act above 3 times. Nay, and some that have been refused at one house is found a good one at the other. This made Taylor say he would not show it him, but is angry, and hath carried it to the other house, and he thinks it will be acted there, though he tells me they are not yet agreed upon it. But I will find time to get it read to me, and I did get my wife to begin a little tonight in the garden, but not so much as I could make any judgment of it. So home to supper and to bed. 8th, up and to the office, and there comes lead to me, and at last my vizards are done, and glasses got to put in and out, as I will, and I think I have brought it to the utmost, both for easiness of using and benefit that I can, and so I paid him 15s. For what he hath done now last in the finishing them, and they, I hope, will do me a great deal of ease. At the office all the morning, and this day, the first time, did alter my side of the table, after above 8 years sitting on that next the fire. But now I am not able to bear the light of the windows in my eyes, I do begin there, and I did sit with much more content than I had done on the other side for a great while, and in winter the fire will not trouble my back. At noon home to dinner, and after dinner all the afternoon within, with Mr. Hayter, Gibson, and W. Hewer, reading over and drawing up new things in the instructions of commanders, which will be good, and I hope to get them confirmed by the Duke of York, though I perceive nothing will effectually perfect them, but to look over the whole body of the instructions, of all the officers of a ship, and make them all perfect together. This being done, comes my bookseller, and brings me home bound my collection of papers, about my address to the Duke of York in August, which makes me glad, it being that which shall do me more right many years hence than, perhaps, all I ever did in my life. And therefore I do, both for my own and the King's sake, value it much. By and by also comes Brown, the mathematical instrument maker, and brings me home my instrument for perspective, made according to the description of Dr. Renz in the late Transactions, and he hath made it, I think, very well, and that I believe will do the thing, and therein gives me great content. But have I fear all the content that must be received by my eyes is almost lost. So to the office, and there late at business, and then home to supper and to bed. 9th Lord's Day. Up, and after dressing in my best suit with gold trimming, I to the office, and there with Gibson and Tom finishing against tomorrow my notes upon Commander's instructions, and, when church time, to church with my wife, leaving them at work. Dr. Mills preached a dull sermon, and so we home to dinner, and thence by coach to St. Andrew's, Holborn, thinking to have heard Dr. Stillingfleet preach, but we could not get a place, and so to St. Margaret's, Westminster, and there heard a sermon, and did get a place, the first we have heard there these many years, and here at a distance I saw Betty Mitchell, but she is become much a plainer woman than she was a girl. Thence towards the park, but too soon to go in, so went on to Knightsbridge, and there eat and drank at the World's End, where we had good things, and then back to the park, and there till night, being fine weather and much company, and so home, and after supper to bed. This day I first left off both my waistcoats by day, and my waistcoat by night, it being very hot weather, so hot as to make me break out, here and there in my hands, which vexes me to see, but is good for me. 10th, troubled about 3 in the morning with my wife's calling her maid up and rising herself to go with her coach abroad to gather maydew, which she did, and I troubled for it, for fear of any hurt, going abroad so betimes, happening to her. But I to sleep again, and she come home about 6, and to bed again all well, and I up and with Mr. Gibson by coach to St. James' and thence to Whitehall, where the Duke of York met the office, and there discoursed of several things, particularly the instructions of commanders of ships. But here happened by chance a discourse of the Council of Trade, against which the Duke of York is mightily displeased, and particularly Mr. Child, against whom he speaking hardly, Captain Cox did second the Duke of York, by saying that he was talked of for an unfair dealer with masters of ships, about freight. To which Sir T. Littleton very hotly and foolishly replied presently, that he never heard any honest man speak ill of Child. To which the Duke of York did make a smart reply, and was angry. So as I was sorry to hear it come so far, and that I, by seeming to assent to Cox, might be observed too much by Littleton, though I said nothing aloud, for this must breed great heart-burnings. After this meeting done, the Duke of York took the treasurers into his closet to chide them, as Mr. Wren tells me. For that my Lord Keeper did last night at the council say, when nobody was ready to say anything against the constitution of the Navy, that he did believe the treasurers of the Navy had something to say, which was very foul on their part, to be parties against us. They being gone, Mr. Wren took boat, thinking to dine with my Lord of Canterbury. But when we come to Lambeth, the gate was shut, which is strictly done at 12 o'clock, and nobody comes in afterwards. So we lost our labor, and therefore back to Whitehall, and thence walked my boy Jacky with me to my Lord Crewe, whom I have not seen since he was sick, which is 8 months ago, I think, and there dined with him. He is mightily broke. A stranger, a country gentleman, was with him, and he pleased with my discourse accidentally about the decay of gentlemen's families in the country, telling us that the old rule was that a family might remain 50 miles from London 100 years, 100 miles from London 200 years, and so farther, or nearer London more or less years. He also told us that he hath heard his father say that in his time it was so rare for a country gentleman to come to London, that, when he did come, he used to make his will before he set out. Thence, to St. James's, and there met the Duke of York, who told me with great content that he did now think he should master our adversaries, for that the king did tell him that he was satisfied in the constitution of the Navy, but that it was well to give these people leave to object against it, which they having not done, he did give order to give warrant to the Duke of York to direct Sir Jeremy Smith to be a commissioner of the Navy in the room of Penn. Which though he be an impertinent fellow, yet I am glad of it, it showing that the other side is not so strong as it was. And so, in plain terms, the Duke of York did tell me that they were every day losing ground, and particularly that he would take care to keep out Child. At all which I am glad, though yet I dare not think myself secure, as the king may yet be wrought upon by these people to bring changes in our office, and remove us ere it be long. Thence I to Whitehall, and there took boat to Westminster, and to Mrs. Martin's, who is not come to town from her husband at Portsmouth. So drank only at Cragg's with Doll, and so to the Swan, and there Baser a new maid that is there, and so to Whitehall again, to a committee of Tangier, where I see all things going to rack in the business of the corporation, and consequently in the place, by Middleton's going. Thence walked a little with Creed, who tells me he hears how fine my horses and coach are, and advises me to avoid being noted for it, which I was vexed to hear taken notice of, it being what I feared, and Povey told me of my gold lace sleeves in the park yesterday, which vexed me also, so as to resolve never to appear in court with them, but presently to have them taken off, as it is fit I should, and so to my wife at Unthank, and coach, and so called at my tailor's to that purpose, and so home. And after a little walk in the garden, home to supper and to bed. 11th. My wife again up by 4 o'clock to go to gather maydew, and so back home by 7 to bed, and by I up and to the office, where all the morning, and dined at noon at home with my people, and so all the afternoon. In the evening my wife and I all alone, with the boy by water, up as high as Putney almost, with the tide, and back again, neither staying going nor coming, but talking and singing and reading a foolish copy of verses upon my Lord Mayor's entertaining of all the bachelors, designed in praise to my Lord Mayor, and so home and to the office a little, and then home to bed, my eyes being bad. some trouble at court for fear of the queen's miscarrying, she being, as they all conclude, far gone with child. 12th, up and to Westminster Hall, where the term is, and this the first day of my being there, and here by chance met Roger Pepys, come to town the last night. I was glad to see him. After some talk with him and others, and among others Sir Charles Harbord and Sidney Montagu, the latter of whom is to set out tomorrow towards Flanders and Italy, I invited them to dine with me tomorrow, and so to Mrs. Martin's lodging, who come to town last night, and there did hazer her, she having been a month, I think, at Portsmouth with her husband, newly come home from the Straits. But Lord, how silly the woman talks of her great entertainment there, and how all the gentry come to visit her, and that she believes her husband is worth L6 or L700, which nevertheless I am glad of, but I doubt they will spend it a fast. Thence home, and after dinner my wife and I to the Duke of York's playhouse, and there, in the side balcony over against the music, did hear, but not see, a new play the first day acted, The Roman Virgin, an old play, and but ordinary, I thought. But the trouble of my eyes with the light of the candles did almost kill me. Thence to my Lord Sandwich, and there had a promise from Sidney to come and dine with me tomorrow, and so my wife and I home in our coach, and there find my brother John, as I looked for, come to town from Ellington, where, among other things, he tell me the first news that my is with child, and fat gone, which I know not whether it did more trouble or please me, having no great care for my friends to have children, though I love other people's. So, glad to see him, we to supper, and so to bed. 13th, up and to the office, where all the morning, it being a rainy foul day. But at noon comes my Lord Hinchingbroke and Sidney and Sir Charles Harbord and Roger Pepys and dined with me, and had a good dinner and very merry with us all the afternoon, it being a farewell to Sidney. And so in the evening they away, and I to my business at the office and so to supper, and talk with my brother, and so to bed. 14th, up and to St. James's to the Duke of York, and thence to Whitehall, where we met about office business, and then at noon with Mr. Wren to Lambeth, to dinner with the Archbishop of Canterbury. The first time I was ever there, and I have long longed for it, where a noble house, and well furnished with good pictures and furniture, and noble attendants in good order, and great deal of company, though an ordinary day. And exceeding great cheer, nowhere better or so much that ever I think I saw for an ordinary table. And the bishop mighty kind to me, particularly desiring my company another time, when less company there. Most of the company gone, and I going, I heard by a gentleman of a sermon that was to be there. And so I stayed to hear it, thinking it serious, till by and by the gentleman told me it was a mockery, by one Cornet Bolton, a very gentlemanlike man, that behind a chair did pray and preach like a presbyter Scot that ever I heard in my life, with all the possible imitation in grimaces and voice. And his text about the hanging up their harps upon the willows, and a serious good sermon too, exclaiming against bishops, and crying up of my good Lord Eglinton, till it made us all burst. But I did wonder to have the bishop at this time to make himself sport with things of this kind, but I perceive it was shewn him as a rarity, and he took care to have the room door shut. But there were about 20 gentlemen there, and myself, infinitely pleased with the novelty. So over to Whitehall to a little committee of Tangier, and thence walking in the gallery, I met Sir Thomas Osborne, who, to my great content, did of his own accord fall into discourse with me, with so much professions of value and respect, placing the whole virtue of the office of the navy upon me, and that for the comptroller's place, no man in England was fit for it but me, when Sir J. Minns, as he says it is necessary, is removed. But then he knows not what to do for a man in my place. And in discourse, though I have no mind to the other, I did bring in Tom Hayter to be the fittest man in the world for it, which he took good notice of. But in the whole I was mightily pleased, reckoning myself now 50%, securer in my place than I did before think myself to be. Thence to unthank and there find my wife, but not dressed, which vexed me, because going to the park, it being a most pleasant day after yesterday's rain, which lays all the dust, and most people going out thither, which vexed me. So home sullen, but then my wife and I by water with my brother, as high as Fulham, talking and singing and playing the rogue with the western bargemen, about the women of Woolwich, which mads them, and so back home to supper and to bed. 15th, up, and at the office all the morning. Dined at home and Creed with me home, and I did discourse about evening some reckonings with him in the afternoon. But I could not, for my eyes, do it, which troubled me and vexed him that would not. But yet we were friends, I advancing him more without it, and so to walk all the afternoon together in the garden. And I perceive still he do expect a change in of matters, especially as to religion, and fits himself for it by professing himself for it in his discourse. He gone, I to my business at my office, and so at night home to supper and to bed. 16th Lord's Day. My wife and I at church, our pew filled with Mrs. Backwell, and 6 more that she brought with her, which vexed me at her confidence. Dined at home and W. Batelier with us, and I all the afternoon drawing up a foul draft of my petition to the Duke of York, about my eyes, for leave to spend 3 or 4 months out of the office, drawing it so as to give occasion to a voyage abroad which I did, to my pretty good liking. And then with my wife to Hyde Park, where a good deal of company, and good weather, and so home to supper and to bed. 17th. Up and to several places doing business, and the home to dinner, and then my wife and I and brother John by coach to the King's Playhouse, and saw The Spanish Curate revived, which is a pretty good play, but my eyes troubled with seeing it mightily. Thence carried them and Mr. Gibson, who met me at my Lord Brounker's with a fair copy of my petition, which I thought to show the Duke of York this night, but could not, and therefore carried them to the park, where they had never been, and so home to supper and to bed. Great the news now of the French taking St. Domingo, in Spaniola, from the Spaniards, which troubles us, that they should have it, and have the honor of taking it, when we could not. 18th. Up and to St. James's and other places, and then to the office where all the morning. At noon home and dined in my wife's chamber, she being much troubled with the toothache, and I stayed till a surgeon of hers come, one Leeson, who hath formerly drawn her mouth, and he advised her to draw it. So I to the office, and by word is come that she hath drawn it, which pleased me, it being well done. So I home, to comfort her, and so back to the office till night busy, and so home to supper and to bed. 19th. With my coach to St. James's, and there finding the Duke of York gone to muster his men, in Hyde Park, I alone with my boy thither, and there saw more, walking out of my coach as other gentlemen did, of a soldier's trade, than ever I did in my life. The men being mighty fine, and their commanders, particularly the Duke of Monmouth. But methought their trade but very easy as to the mustering of their men, and the men but indifferently ready to perform what was commanded, in the handling of their arms. Here the news was first talked of Harry Killigrew's being wounded in 9 places last night, by footmen, in the highway, going from the park in a hackney coach towards Hammersmith, to his house at Turnham Green. They being supposed to be my Lady Shrewsbury's men, she being by, in her coach with 6 horses, upon an old grudge of his saying openly that he had lain with her. Thence by to Whitehall, and there I waited upon the King and Queen all dinner time, in the Queen's lodgings, she being in her white pinner and apron, like a woman with child, and she seemed handsomer plain so than dressed. And by, dinner done, I out and to walk in the gallery, for the Duke of York's coming out. And there, meeting Mr. May, he took me down about 4 o'clock to Mr. Chevens's lodgings, and all alone did get me a dish of cold chickens and good wine, and I dined like a prince, being before very hungry and empty. By the Duke of York comes, and readily took me to his closet, and received my petition, and discoursed about my eyes, and pitied me, and with much kindness did give me his consent to be absent, and approved of my proposition to go into Holland to observe things there, of the navy. But would first ask the King's leave, which he anon did, and did tell me that the King would be a good master to me. These were his words, about my eyes, and do like of my going into Holland. But do advise that nobody should know of my going thither, but pretend that I did go into the country somewhere, which I liked well. Glad of this, I home, and thence took out my wife, and to Mr. Holliard, about a swelling in her cheek, but he not at home, and so round by Islington and eat and drink, and so home, and after supper to bed. In discourse this afternoon, the Duke of York did tell me that he was the most amazed at one thing just now, that ever he was in his life, which was, that the Duke of Buckingham did just now come into the Queen's bedchamber, where the King was, and much mixed company, and among others, Tom Killigrew, the father of Harry, who was last night wounded so as to be in danger of death, and his man is quite dead. And there in discourse did say that he had spoke with some one that was by, which all the world must know that it must be his whore, my Lady Shrewsbury, who says that they did not mean to hurt, but beat him, and that he did run first at them with his sword. So that he do hereby clearly discover that he knows who did it, and is of conspiracy with them, being of known conspiracy with her, which the Duke of York did seem to be pleased with, and said it might, perhaps, cost him his life in the House of Lords. And I find was mightily pleased with it, saying it was the most impudent thing, as well as the most foolish, that ever he knew man do in all his life. 20th, up into the office were all the morning. At noon, the whole office brounker, J. Minns, T. Middleton, Samuel Pepys, and Captain Cox to dine with the parish, at the 3 Tuns, this day being Ascension Day, were exceeding good discourse among the merchants, and thence back home, and after a little talk with my wife, to my office did a great deal of business, and so with my eyes might weary, and my head full of care how to get my accounts and business settled against my journey, home to supper and bed. Yesterday, at my coming home, I found that my wife had, on a sudden, put away Matt upon some falling out, and I doubt my wife did call her ill names by my wife's own discourse. But I did not meddle to say anything upon it, but let her go, being not sorry, because now we may get one that speaks French, to go abroad with us. 21st, I waited with the office upon the Duke of York in the morning, dined at home, where Louis Phillips, the friend of his, dined with me, in the afternoon at the office. In the evening visited by Roger Pepys and Philip Packer, and so home. 22nd, dined at home, the rest of the whole day at office. 23rd, Lord's Day. Called up by Roger Pepys and his son who to church with me, and then home to dinner. In the afternoon carried them to Westminster, and myself to James's, where, not finding the Duke of York, back home, and with my wife spent the evening taking the air about Hackney, with great pleasure, and places we had never seen before. 24th, to Whitehall, and there all the morning, and they home, and giving order for some business, and setting my brother to making a catalogue of my books. I back again to W. Hewer to Whitehall, where I attended the Duke of York and was by him led too, who expressed great sense of my misfortune in my eyes, and concernment for their recovery, and accordingly signified, not only his assent to desire therein, but commanded me to give them rest summer, according to my late petition to the Duke of York. W. Hewer and I dined alone at the Swan, and thence having thus waited on the king, spent till 4 o'clock in St. James's Park, when I met my wife at Unthank S, and so home. 25th, dined at home, and the rest of the day, morning and afternoon, at the office. 26th, to Whitehall were all the morning, dined with Mr. Chevens with Alderman Backwell and Spragg. The court full of the news from Captain Hubbard, of the Milford, touching his being affronted in the Straits, shot at, and having 8 men killed him by a French man-of-war, calling him English dog, and commanding him to strike, which he refused, and, as knowing himself much too weak for him, made away from him. The Queen, as being supposed with child, fell ill, so as to call for Madam Nunn, Mr. Chevens's sister, and one of her women, from dinner from us. This being the last day of their doubtfulness touching her being with child, and they were therein well confirmed by her Majesty's being well again before night. One Sir Edmund Barry Godfrey, a woodmonger and justice of peace in Westminster, having 2 days since arrested Sir Alexander Frazier for about L30 in firing, the bailiffs were apprehended, committed to the porter's lodge, and there, by the king's command, the last night severely whipped, from which the justice himself very hardly escaped, to such an unusual degree was the king moved therein. But he lies now in the lodge, justifying his act, as grounded upon the opinion of several of the judges, and among others my Lord Chief Justice, which makes the king very angry with the Chief Justice, as they say, and the justice do lie and justify his act, and says he will suffer in the cause for the people, and do refuse to receive almost any nutriment. The effects of it may be bad to the court. Expected a meeting of Tangier this afternoon, but failed. So home, met by my wife at Unthanks. 27th. At the office all the morning, dined at home Mr. Hollier with me, presented this day by Mr. Brown with a book of drawing by him, lately printed, which cost me 20s. To him. In the afternoon to the Temple, to meet with Auditor Aldworth about my interest account, but failed meeting him. To visit my cousin Creed and found her ill at home, being with child and looks poorly. Thence to her husband, at Gresham College, upon some occasions of Tangier, and so home, with Sir John Banks with me, to Mark Lane. 28th. To St. James's, where the King, being with the Duke of York, prevented a meeting of the Tangier Commission. But, Lord, What a deal of sorry discourse did I hear between the king and several lords about him here, but very mean methought. So with Creed to the excise office, and back to Whitehall, where in the park Sir G. Carteret did give me an account of his discourse lately, with the commissioners of accounts, who accept against many things, but none that I find considerable. Among others, that of the officers of the navy selling of the king's goods, and particularly my providing him with calico flags, which having been by order, and but once, when necessity and the king's apparent profit justified it, as conformable to my particular duty, it will prove to my advantage that it be inquired into. Nevertheless, having this morning received from them a demand of an account of all moneys within their cognizance, received and issued by me, I was willing, upon this hint, to give myself rest, by knowing whether their meaning therein might reach only to my treasurership for Tangier, or the moneys employed on this occasion. I went therefore to them this afternoon to understand what moneys they meant, where they answered me by saying, the 11 months' tax, customs, and prize money, without mentioning, any more than I demanding, the service they respected therein. And so, without further discourse, we parted upon very good terms of respect, and with few words, but my mind not fully satisfied about the moneys they mean. At noon, Mr. Gibson and I dined at the Swan, and thence doing this at Brook House, and thence caking at the excise office for an account of payment of my tallies for Tangier, I home, and thence with my wife and brother spent the evening on the water, carrying our supper with us, as high as Chelsea. So home, making sport with the western bargees, and my wife and I singing, to my great content. 29th, the King's birthday. To Whitehall, where all very gay, and particularly the Prince of Tuscany very fine, and is the first day of his appearing out of mourning since he come. I heard the Bishop of Peterborough preach but dully, but a good anthem of Pelham S. Home to dinner, and then with my wife to Hyde Park, where all the evening, great store of company and great preparations by the Prince of Tuscany to celebrate the night with fireworks for the King's birthday, and so home. 30th, Whitsunday. By water to Whitehall, and thence to Sir W. Coventry, where all the morning by his bedside, he being indisposed. Our discourse was upon the notes I have lately prepared for Commander's instructions, but concluded that nothing will render them effectual without an amendment in the choice of them, that they be seamen, and not gentlemen above the command of the Admiral, by the greatness of their relations at court. Thence to Whitehall, and dined alone with Mr. Chevens his sister. Whither by and by come in Mr. Progers and Sir Thomas Allen, and by fine Mrs. Wells, who is a great beauty, and there I had my full gaze upon her, to my great content, she being a woman of pretty conversation. Thence to the Duke of York, who, with the officers of the navy, made a good entrance on my draft of my new instructions to commanders, as well expressing general of a reformation among them, as liking of my humble offers towards it. Thence being called by my wife, Mr. Gibson, and I, we to the park, whence the rains suddenly home. 31st. Up very betimes, and so continued all the morning with W. Hewer, upon examining and stating my accounts, in order to the fitting myself to go abroad beyond sea, which the ill condition of my eyes and my neglect for a year or two hath kept me behindhand in, and so as to render it very difficult now, and troublesome to my mind to do it. But I this day made a satisfactory entrance therein. Dined at home, and in the afternoon by water to Whitehall, calling by the way at Mitchell's, where I have not been many a day till just the other day, and now I met her mother there and knew her husband to be out of town. And here G did baser L, but had not opportunity pair a hazersome with her, as I would have offered if G had had it. And thence had another meeting with the Duke of York, at Whitehall on yesterday's work, and made a good advance. And so, being called by my wife, we to the park, Mary Baitlier, and a Dutch gentleman, a friend of hers, being with us. Thence to the World's End, a drinking house by the park, and there merry, and so home late. And thus ends all that I doubt I shall ever be able to do with my own eyes in the keeping of my journal, I being not able to do it any longer, having done now so long as to undo my eyes almost every time that I take a pen in my hand. And therefore, whatever comes of it, I must forbear, and therefore resolve, from this time forward, to have it kept by my people in longhand, and must therefore be contented to set down no more than is fit for them and all the world to know. Or, if there be anything, which cannot be much, now my amours to Deb are past, and my eyes hindering me in almost all other pleasures, I must endeavor to keep a margin in my book open, to add, here and there, a note in shorthand with my own hand. And so I betake myself to that course, which is almost as much as to see myself go into my grave, for which, and all the discomforts that will accompany my being blind, the good God prepare me. May 31, 1669. End of the diary. Preface. This moved, by the editor, to the end where it seems to fit more comfortably. First issue of this edition, June, 1896. Reprinted 1897. In the present volume, the diary is completed, and we here take leave of a writer who has done so much to interest and enlighten successive generations of English readers, and who is now for the first time presented to the world as he really drew his own portrait day by day. No one who has followed the daily notes of Samuel Pepys from January 1660 to May 1669, but must feel sincere regret at their abrupt conclusion, more particularly as the writer lays down his pen while in an unhappy temper. It is evident from the tone of his later utterances that Pepys thought that he was going blind, a belief which was happily falsified. The holiday tour in which Charles Roman II and James, Duke of York, took so much interest appears to have had its desired effect in restoring the diarist to health. The rest of his eventful life must be sought in the history of the English Navy, which he helped to form, and in his numerous letters, which on some future occasion the present editor hopes to annotate. The details to be obtained from these sources form, however, but a sorry substitute for the words written in the solitude of his office by Pepys for his own eye alone, and we cannot but feel how great is the world's loss in that he never resumed the writing of his journal. All must agree with Coleridge when he wrote on the margin of a copy of the diary, "Truly may it be said that this was a greater and more grievous loss to the mind's eye of posterity than to the bodily organs of Pepys himself. It makes me restless and discontented to think what a diary equal in minuteness and truth of portraiture to the preceding from 1669 to 1688 or 1690 would have been for the true causes, process, and character of the Revolution. Most works of this nature are apt to tire when they are extended over a certain length of time, but Pepys's pages are always fresh, and most readers wish for more. For himself, the editor can say that each time he has read over the various proofs, he has read with renewed interest, so that it is with no ordinary feelings of regret that he comes to the end of his task, and he believes that every reader will feel the same regret that he has no more to read. In reviewing the diary, it is impossible not to notice the growth of historical interest as it proceeds. In the earlier period, we find Pepys surrounded by men not otherwise known, but as the years pass and his position becomes more assured, we find him in daily communication with the chief men of his day, and evidently everyone who came in contact with him appreciated his remarkable ability. The survival of the diary must ever remain a marvel. It could never have been intended for the reading of others, but doubtless the more elaborate portraits of persons in the later pages were intended for use when Pepys came to write his projected history of the Navy. The only man who is uniformly spoken well of in the diary is Sir William Coventry, and many of the characters introduced come in for severe castigation. It is therefore the more necessary to remember that many of the judgments on men were set down hastily, and would probably have been modified had occasion offered. At all events, we know that, however much he may have censured them, Pepys always helped on those who were dependent upon him. HRW